Welcome to this special rebuttal. Now, I don't want to spend a lot of time on this individual who is a coward. He ran away from having a face to face debate. He played a lot of games, wasted a lot of time, wasted money, tried to steal money. And he is somebody who, I said steal, maybe that's not the best description. Let's just say tried to give himself a excuse to hold on to someone else's money, even though he knew that was unethical, which is basically stealing. But then he was forced to give it back in a very humiliating way. And anyway, so there's a lot of things I can say about this particular specimen. I want to start with his obsession with Denis Noble. Now, I've been away from the scene, like I haven't been refuting him for a while, and he's still in his mind somewhere. Denis Noble is, just there floating around because he can't really grasp what he's saying. And since I used his argument in the debate that we had that he lost, he has to find a way of, crawling out of the hole and getting some of his dignity back. But the problem is, he's not really doing that. He's back in the hole and he's digging deeper. The best thing for him to do, actually, after the debate was to simply stop responding to my subsequent challenges. I asked him to have a debate on intelligent design and universal common ancestry. He stopped responding to me. I made numerous attempts to communicate this, and he simply doesn't want to engage. Okay, fine. You lost a debate. Everyone saw that. So you decided, okay, I'm just going to ignore this guy. I'm not going to respond. I'm not going to do anything. And that's fine from a coward's perspective. But you're still attacking Denis Noble. So you are basically trying to recover from the debate. So what I'm going to do in this video, I'm actually going to respond to his video in detail, and also I'm going to be educating him on things that are quite basic, which he's unaware of. Now, the first thing I'd like to say is there's actually a lot going on in the last couple of days, and these things are sort of connected. There was an abysmal debate the other day between Muhammad Hijab and Destiny in person. He got absolutely annihilated. And that's what happens in face to face debates. This is why Farina didn't want to come to the UK. This is why I had to give a talk on my own at Brunel University, and everyone saw that. This is also why he was playing games for months, and in the end, he just opted for an online debate, and we only debated one topic. We were supposed to debate three, and I'm still going to give him this open offer. If he wants to come to the UK at his own expense and contact a university and set it up, and I'm willing to turn up. If he is going to come to the UK at any time in the future, I am more than happy to just have a podcast with him where we can sit down in a venue which is neutral. There's lots of neutral platforms which, are not, they don't really have a skin in the fight. So there's lots of ways we can actually interact. Now, I don't think he's going to engage with me. I think he's learned his lesson. He's learned what happens when you actually, in a formal setting, have to justify your position, articulate your position, and be in a particular mode to respond live. You can't be scripted. And obviously, he loves to script his videos. He loves to have a very controlled environment in which he can flourish and supposedly debunk all these people. So anyway, so the hijab debate is something for anyone that's interested. I did a review with Fraz Zahabi the other day. You can see that live, not live, it's a past live recording. And also there's an interesting thing I do want to comment about, which is sort of linked. Dawkins does not respond to Denis Noble in the same way that Farina does. In fact, he's very respectful, he's cordial, and he actually engages with him on a peer-to-peer view. So why is it that you, as an atheist, you are ignoring someone who you should be respecting, which is Richard Dawkins, who is actually someone with a lot more knowledge of evolutionary biology than you, and he doesn't say Dennis Noble is a clown. Now, your video, its title and its just the way that you speak shows a lot of animosity, shows a lot of resentment, I could say. And it's not the sort of thing which looks good. Let's just put it that way. What you have to realize is that people can smell cowardice, they can smell insecurity, they can smell when something is sloppy and hastily done. So you reached out to your audience and you did a monologue on him. Wouldn't it be better to invite, say, myself and my, say, co-author Salman Butt? We both wrote a book on Dawkins and Noble. You could actually go through my book, and we could do a live. What's the point of having a monologue? What's the point of insulting an academic? And people are going to be looking at you thinking, you don't have a PhD, you prance around like a professor, but you're not. You don't act like one either. um, you're basically someone who is underwhelming and underperforming, and you were domesticated during the debate, and now you're coming out trying to recover some of your dignity by attacking an old man who is someone that should be respected. I mean, just look at your age, look at his age. There has to be a level of respect. Um, it's, I wouldn't say it's beneath you, because that would apply to someone else or pretty much everyone else. It's the sort of thing I would expect, but not a very smart thing from a PR perspective. But anyway, so my book, The Death of Neo-Darwinism, and Dawkins Deselected the Extinction of New Atheism, you can actually get a lot of information there. And some of that information is related to the debate I had. Well, we say debate, but he wasn't really putting up any resistance. So there's that. I'm also going to be doing a video in the future on Farina as well. I'm probably going to pace it out. This guy's, taking up. He's someone I do want to refute, but at the same time, I can sense that he doesn't want to engage. He's a coward. So it's going to be a bit tough to try and get a reaction from him. But anyway, let's get started. Let's share his video. And as you can see, it is titled Dennis Noble is a Clown. And here he is, looking all, how should we say, deflated already. But anyway, let's see what he has to say.
As you all know, one of my favorite things to debunk is creationism in all its varieties. And there's a particular scholar that creationists have been referencing lately named Denis Noble. What's he all about, and why do creationists love him so much when he isn't one himself? Let's find out. Denis Noble is a British physiologist who has been somewhat influential, having developed the first mathematical model of cardiac cells in 1960. He was also a co-founder of the field of systems biology, which uses computational modeling to understand how cells and organ systems function. So he is not in the same category as the
Okay, let's just, like, that's interesting. So you're praising him, but your video is called Dennis Noble's a Clown. And if you notice in my books and in my videos, I openly say he's not a creationist. So you opening in this particular manner as if this is some sort of amazing angle, that's poor. Secondly, you didn't actually do justice. So let's go back for a second. It must have been painful, right? It must have been quite painful to describe briefly. He's been somewhat influential. He developed something in the 1960s. uh okay, maybe you should go to his Wikipedia page and read up a bit more about him. Hundreds of published peer-reviewed papers. He's been a maverick biologist. He is someone who is considered a legend. So it is painful for you to praise him a little bit, but there's a lot more that can be said about him. But anyway, let's continue. You have a very strange obsession with this man, but I guess we're going to have to be patient and deal with you one step at a time.
Modeling to understand how cells and organ systems function. So he is not in the same category as the charlatans at Discovery Institute or other such propaganda outlets.
Okay, so he'll always make these sweeping statements, right? The charlatans at the Discovery Institute. Um, so those people at the Discovery Institute, they constitute biologists, philosophers, and mathematicians, all with prestigious backgrounds, who've taught at university, who have PhDs, who are actually way more qualified than you are. What qualifications do you have? Do you see how he continuously just builds these sort of strawmans? You know, okay, this guy is like this, but he's not like these charlatans. He doesn't justify what he actually is saying. But that's one of the painful things with dealing with this coward.
However, in his twilight years, he has stepped outside of his expertise to push unscientific rhetoric in the area of evolutionary biology.
Okay, there you go. Sweeping statement. Unscientific. What was the term he used? Okay. Unscientific rhetoric. All right. Fine. Unscientific rhetoric. Okay. This is gonna be painful. Man. Why do I even bother with this guy? Hmm. How do you share again? Oh yeah, here. Just gonna load up his Wikipedia page. If this guy bothered to do any research, he would know. So anyway, there's a lot of things that could be said, but let's just go to some of his research. Okay. All right. Man, do I have to read all of this out? This is so long. But anyway, okay, let's just get into this. So you can see there's work going back to the 1960s and 70s. All right, but this is where, you know, he mentions his twilight years and he mentions some things, you know, about them. So in his twilight years, what has he actually done? Hopefully you guys can see this so we can speak about this. Okay, so um, the book that I'm sure, I hope he's referring to, because if he's going to speak about his twilight years, this is now Understanding Living Systems, which he wrote with his book, Ray Noble, okay, published by Cambridge University. So unscientific rhetoric being published by Cambridge. Okay. How are you going to justify that statement? On purpose. Again, this is MIT Press. Okay. Where else do we have? There we go. Fantastic. The Music of Life. That was actually the first book he published, I believe, in 2006. Oxford University Press. You can see that there, the Biology Beyond the Genome. Excellent, excellent book. Now, beyond that, you will actually find there's a lot more stuff he's been, you know, pushing out over the years. Noble has published over 700 articles in academic journals, including Nature. Nature, I'm sure you guys know, is incredibly prestigious. Science, PNAS, Journey of Physiology. Okay, let's just go to Nature for a second. And let's just click on one of them. No, let's find another one. All right. I think this is it. Okay, here we go. Unraveling genetics and mechanisms of cardiac arrhythmia. Okay, you guys can see that there. Sorry, it's a bit small. All right, I would challenge, right, Dave Farina to take one of his papers, just one of his papers, from his so-called twilight years, and he's been pushing unscientific rhetoric. I don't want him to do that with the books, because I want him to challenge the actual papers, because the books are based upon the papers. I want him to read through it and debunk one paper. Just do that. It'd be nice actually, because you could make your entry into academia. You could actually publish something in a prestigious journal rather than making YouTube videos for teenagers, right? I'm not saying it's bad to make YouTube videos for teenagers, but you could really get your name out there in the academic world. So just one of his papers. I mean, this is just one paper. I just highlighted it randomly, right? There you go. So if you want to challenge anything he says there, in fact, let's just make it easier for you. The Music of Life is a very small book, right? I want you to write a article review on it. Just write an article review and explain why this guy is not only wrong, according to you, he's a clown. So it's just terrible the way that you begin this video by not even actually explaining uh, who this guy really is and why he is important. And you just go straight into character assassination and using terms like, unscientific rhetoric. And this is all to tap into the subconscious mind and get people to build an image before you've given a shred of evidence. This is the thing about you, Farina. You haven't so far given a shred of evidence about this guy. You've just stated a bunch of terms and you want your audience to believe those things. Okay? So this is exactly what a charlatan does. This is a sophist. The best thing for you to do is actually to go over some serious material and engage with it in a academic manner and then explain why he's wrong. Right in the beginning, you're starting to use these sort of trigger terms, unscientific rhetoric and whatever, right? I know exactly what you're doing. I know exactly what you're doing. I studied NLP. I know exactly what you're doing. You're trying to build an image before you get into anything. And a lot of your audience is not even going to know that you're actually completely unaware of his teachings. And that was clear in the debate. In the debate, you got caught like a deer. Uh, it's caught in the headlights in the middle of the night with its eyes like that. You're completely confused and rattled. So people saw that. And now you're trying to recover. I mean, basic things like somatic hypermutation, genetic assimilation, stuff that Nobel's been talking about for years and years and years and years. You do not engage with that in the debate. You don't have an idea what you're talking about. You're basically a plonker when it comes to these things. And what do? You basically make a video afterwards pretending like you know what you're talking about. Anyway, it's going to be a slow grind, but you're going to learn. All right.
Outside of his expertise to push unscientific rhetoric.
Outside of his expertise. Nope, that's not outside of his expertise. Darwin studied geology, right? And he spoke about evolutionary biology, but he also spoke about evolutionary psychology. Like, what are you talking about? He is a bona fide academic. If he's talking outside of his field, why would Cambridge and Oxford and all these, nature and science, why would they publish his papers? So again, I know what you're doing from an NLP perspective. I know exactly the type of straw man and character assassination that you're trying to do. Anyway,
In the area of evolutionary biology. To put this into perspective, there's an interesting phenomenon informally known as Nobel disease or Nobelitis. This is the bizarre tendency of certain Nobel laureates to adopt crackpot ideas later in life. This seems to occur because these scholars, having experienced so much success in their own field, believe they possess.
again, guys, go back to the neuro linguistic programming. Look at how he's building an image without giving a shred of evidence. It would be better for him to start off the video by providing all the evidence and then trying to give certain labels. We know exactly what this guy's doing.
The knowledge and expertise to comment on any field of science. And of course, they can hide behind their Nobel Prize, gesturing towards it whenever someone doubts their brilliance. The premier example of this is Luc Montagnier.
Okay, look at this, guys, right? Look at this, guys. It's in this video so far, he hasn't mentioned a shred of evidence why Denis Noble is wrong. And he's gone further and he's claimed he's a clown, right? Right now, he's trying to set the stage. He's going through this academic uh, assassination. He's trying to basically destroy his credibility before he can even open his mouth about him.
Ye, who won a Nobel for isolating the HIV virus, but then descended into total crack pottery, pushing water memory and other blatantly pseudoscientific nonsense.
Okay, what does that have to do with Dennis Noble? What you're basically saying is, oh yeah, these things happen, and so Dennis Noble is like that. We know what you're doing. Well, at least you mentioned that, there's people who get significant success early in life and later on they come up with crackpot ideas. Um, but in your case, you didn't even get significant success and you're just trying to push out crackpot ideas against other academics. So, what does that say about you? Oh, this is
Now, Denis Noble has never won a Nobel Prize himself, but he does suffer from a similar disease, which, given his surname, could be called Nobelitis as well.
okay. There you go, guys. Right? He's tapping into your subconscious mind. He's using trigger terms and building an identity, and he's doing all of this in the beginning. Wouldn't it be better for him to say, guys, I didn't really know about his views on how epigenetics can lead to these type of changes in the genome, and I didn't know about Conrad Waddington, I didn't know these things. Okay, guys, this is where I messed up in the debate. No, pure character assassination. um, and look, if, again, I'm going to go back to a very simple point. If Dave Farina actually wanted to engage with Dennis Noble, he would have done it in the way Richard Dawkins did. He first had a debate. After the debate, he published a book, which came out last year. He dedicated a chapter to refuting Dennis Noble. I got that book and I went through it with a fine comb with Scott Turner. And you can see that review on my channel. So he's been responded to, but you can see Dawkins is dealing with him in a manner that I think is not sufficient to address his arguments. But nonetheless, it's an attempt. You can see something's going on here. He's just trying to destroy his credibility just from the beginning. Nobelitis, right? So now everyone's gonna think Nobelitis, Nobelitis, and this is really unfair. But anyway, we're gonna have to be patient and deal with this guy.
Well, despite being a respected Oxford physiologist, once he retired in the early 2000s, the temptation to dip his fingers into another field was just too great.
Uh, you're missing out a lot of information. He was a reductionist, right? He was the host of the debates that Richard Dawkins had with his opponents. He was friends with Dawkins. He was always in the field. What are you talking about? I pointed out in my debate how physiology guides evolution. That's his perspective. He published a paper on it. Okay, this guy, man. All right, let me break it down. Biology is supposed to be explained by evolutionary theory. I hope you don't disagree with that, Farina. Okay. What encompasses the biological domain? What encompasses biology is biochemistry, genetics, anatomy, physiology, psychology, linguistics, biogeography, paleontology, anthropology, population genetics. So from a low level to a high level, you can see it there. All of these fields are supposed to be integrated within evolutionary theory. You cannot have one level of analysis which is outside of the evolutionary domain, or else the theory is incomplete. I hope you understand this point. So, the first point I'm making is this: evolution as a theory is supposed to explain, and I haven't gone into Darwinism yet, is supposed to explain the biosphere. And the biosphere, in terms of the different levels, I broke it down from biochemistry to population genetics. Okay, all of this has to be colored through evolutionary theory. And the most popular evolutionary theory at the moment is Darwinism. You just said right now he was a respected physiologist. So when he was doing physiology, he wasn't dealing with evolution. Like evolution has nothing to do with physiology. I want you to just think about this. Like this is absolutely central to his argument. His argument is that physiology guides evolution. There are things that happen in the external world and in the soma which go down to the genetic level. Now, if you completely disagree with him, no problem. But you can't say physiology has nothing to do with evolution, because that's like saying biochemistry has nothing to do with evolution, or population genetics has nothing to do with evolution, or God forbid, the fossil record has nothing to do with evolution. Like, what are you saying? Physiology is integrated with evolution. I pointed that out to you in the debate, and you still didn't learn. It makes me feel unloved. It makes me feel like you wasted my time. I was all right. You guys get the point. Physiology cannot be divorced from evolution. Oh, thank you for uh, thank you for showing us MIT's evolution on purpose. MIT is the best university in the world according to this international ranking system. And the second one, incidentally, is Imperial, which is one of the first places that Nobel went to actually go speak about his new systems biology view. But anyway, so you want to say this guy, he published basically crack pottery, unscientific ideas in his twilight years. And then the example that you give here is this book. Um, have you actually gone through this book? Because I hope you realize this has a lot of academics speaking about the same idea. And the idea is quite simple. The idea is that there is agency, purpose, teleology within the biological domain. So he's not the only one holding on to this idea. So what exactly are you saying? Are you saying if this book and its contents are crack pottery, the same thing that you're saying about Denis Noble, you're going to say about everyone else here? Absolutely. This guy is completely, he doesn't know where he is. He doesn't realize how easy this is for me to respond to. Like, this is, I don't even have to think. I could be half asleep right now and deal with this guy. He's just giving me all these open goals.
Now, after a series of books, articles, and more podcast appearances than anyone cares to count, he has come to a startling conclusion. In 2013, he wrote, "All the central assumptions of the modern synthesis, often also called neo Darwinism, have been disproved."
Startling conclusion, which was published in a paper, and you can actually see the paper there. And in fact, let's go back for a second. My title echoes that of Matic, but it also goes further. It is not only the standard 20th century views of molecular genetics that are in question, evolutionary theory itself is already in a state of flux. Then he refers to other academics. And in fact, some of these academics are the ones which were in the previous book on purpose. So he's not the only one talking about this. And there's, okay, James Shapiro. He holds the exact same view. James Shapiro is someone who discovered natural genetic engineering. His book, Evolution, A View from the 21st Century, was a landmark book, and it was actually promoted by Carl Woese. There are three domains of life. Oh man, I have to educate this guy for free again. There are three domains of life. Okay, I hope you know this, Farina. There are three domains of life: bacteria, archaea, and prokarya. Okay. Uh, Carl Woese said this book, James Shapiro's book, is a game changer. Okay? He actually said this is a game changer. Let me try and look for the book. Give me a second. Ah, this guy is so long, man. All right. Where are we? Okay. hope you guys can see. There are going to be some hardcore people watching this. These are the people who just love to watch a roasting. Yeah. And this is happening in real time, slowly. All right, let's go. All right. And there we go. All right. So I hope you guys can see. Can you guys see it? Yes, you can. Okay, so this is the book that was published in 2022, but it's the 2011 version that we want to talk about. So here's the book. Oh, you can see there, I actually ordered it back in 2015. And yeah, this is the old book. So let me just explain something about this book. Let's go back to um, Carl Wohl's. Okay, bacteria, archaea, eukarya. He discovered archaea. He discovered the third domain of life. Who was this dude? He was somebody that impacted biology going in a way that's unprecedented, right? So he was a big don. Can you guys hopefully see? Oh my God, I'm not sharing it. Okay, there we go. Nope, 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 nope. There we go. All right. Can you guys see? All right. Can you guys see that? Let me no, oh yeah, you guys can see that. Okay. Professor Shapiro's offering is the best book on basic modern biology I have ever seen. As far as I can tell, the book is a game changer. So, Mr. Woes, and let's have a look what he, so you guys actually know who he is, because this free, maybe he's, I don't know, this guy may start attacking him next, for all we know. All right, there's his Wikipedia page. So he was a amazing biologist. You can see bacteria, archaea, eukarya, and you can see all of his great stuff. And the most important thing, which should have a part here, discoveries, genetic code, discovery of the third domain. So for much of the 20th century, prokaryotes were regarded as a single group of organisms and classified based on their biochemistry, morphology, and metabolism, blah, 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 blah. Anyway, he discovered eukarya. You can see there. So he discovered that third branch. Okay. He holds the same view that James Shapiro does. He holds the same view that Denis Noble does. These guys all believe that the modern synthesis is outdated. So your supposed attack here is not worth anything. Any biologist worth his salt would, on the minimum, size themselves up before they actually take on someone like Denis Noble because of how prestigious he is. Yet you fail to do that. You don't even realize you don't even realize what his ideas are. You haven't actually, by the way, you haven't articulated so far that you even understand what this guy's talking about. You've already started the character assassination. And anyway, let's see how far let's see where it goes. Hopefully it's going to be more bearable. Oh God, this guy, man.
Of the modern synthesis, often also called neo-Darwinism, have been disproved. So, what's the modern synthesis, you ask?
All right, are you going to now educate us on the modern synthesis? Is he going to educate us on the modern synthesis? Do you guys remember in the debate, when I mentioned that the idea of neo-Darwinism goes back to the late 19th century and modern synthesis came later, and these terms can be used synonymously because neo-Darwinism was integrated, was updated, and that turned into modern synthesis. He got the dates completely wrong. It's like the example I gave of someone saying that World War II took place whenever, I don't remember the exact time, but say someone said World War II took place in the 1980s. That would just be ridiculous, right? So anyway, let's see if this guy's going to get his bearings right, at least. Hopefully he's not going to embarrass himself too much. I want to go through this video um, you know, faster.
Noble defines it as a mid 20th century gene centric view of evolution.
Oh, thank you. Thank you, Mr. Farina. Thank you so much. That's the very reference I was using. That's the very reference in my book. I was actually using, and what is this? Let's go, let's actually zoom in, right? This is exactly the definition I was using. And hopefully he's going to get the rest of this right because he's now using Noble as an authority, which is good.
Based on random mutations accumulating to produce gradual change through natural selection. Now, we have to assume that Noble is somehow equating this mid 20th century view with evolutionary theory as understood today in 2025. Otherwise, why would he be referencing the status of science from 70 years ago as if it were currently relevant? Evolutionary biology, according to this physiologist, is stuck in the 1950s, and apparently nothing whatsoever has happened since.
That is a complete straw man. That is a complete straw man. You are incredibly disingenuous. Noble does not say that biology is like he's dealing with the biology of the 1950s. He's aware of the extended evolutionary synthesis. He's aware of all of the developments. He was actually involved in this stuff. You've just made a complete straw man. Like I can see exactly where you're going. Just like in the beginning, you did a character assassination, and now he's just going to build a total straw man. So let's break this down one step at a time.
Why? Because evolutionary biologists dogmatically cling to their gene centric neo Darwinian view of the world, and that has apparently been disproved. Noble, like any good crackpot, has his own theory, which he calls the third way of evolution. Why the third way? Because according to their website, it sits between neo Darwinism and creationism.
Well, at least you're giving the third way some credibility by, putting it on your YouTube channel. And the smarter people watching you are actually going to go to the third way and they're going to find Carl Woese. They're going to find James Shapiro. They're going to find Denis Noble. They're going to find a whole bunch of biologists and philosophers and others. And they're going to be pleasantly surprised and enlightened. So fantastic. It's actually I'm actually happy you did this.
It's already bad enough that he references creationism along real science as though they are competing paradigms, but even
Oh, for God's sake. Oh my God. Ah, this guy. I can't believe how ridiculous this is. This is just absolutely ridiculous. Denis Noble is not saying, he is not saying it's some sort of credible scientific theory. Okay. It's enough that he references creationism alongside real science as though they were competing paradigms. Read the bloody website. Okay. Here's what it actually says before your stupid emoji takes over the screen. Okay. One way is creationism that depends upon the intervention by a divine creator. That is clearly unscientific. He's not saying it's another, he's equating them like another paradigm which is equivalent scientifically. He's saying it's clearly unscientific because it brings an arbitrary supernatural force into the evolutionary process. Listen to what you're saying.
Theory, which he calls the third way of evolution. Why the third way? Because according to their website, it sits between neo Darwinism and creationism. It's already bad enough that he references creationism along real science as though they are competing paradigms, but even worse, as we'll soon see, his rhetoric resembles the latter more than the former, claiming.
Okay, you plonker, go back and see what he says. He doesn't say creationism. And what are your words exactly? So, you don't say,
Because according to their
quote my words.
website,
Let's
it
see the
sits
words, right?
between neo Darwinism and creationism. It's already bad enough that he references creationism along real science.
It's already bad enough that he references creationism along real science as though they were competing paradigms. He doesn't do that. He actually says, let me zoom in. I can't even zoom in. He actually says, One way is creationism that depends upon the intervention by a divine creator. That is clearly unscientific. He doesn't even consider intelligent design or creationism as science. He considers it pseudoscience. He considers it unscientific. God, absolutely unbelievable. You are trying to refute him, and you're making a straw man using a quote and not actually reading out the entire quote. Like, how disingenuous can you be? How, like, do you think your audience is stupid or something? Like, they can't just read those lines. Ah, this guy, man. Flipping heck. What a liar. Total liar and charlatan. Oh, man. I wish this guy was like live so I can just rip him to shreds. He's hiding like a little coward. Now I can zoom in. Okay. Read it. What does it say there? Only way is creation that blah, blah, blah. Clearly unscientific. Now, okay. If you go a bit later on, not only does it mention it here, you can see he considers creationism not to be science, intelligent design not to be science. It's come to our attention that the Third Way website, hopefully you guys can see it, it's come to our attention that the Third Way website is wrongly being referenced by proponents of intelligent design and creationist ideas as support for their arguments. We intend to make it clear that the website and scientists listed on the website do not support or subscribe to any proposals that resort to inscrutable divine forces or supernatural intervention, whether they're called creationism, intelligent design, or anything else. He doesn't even think you can scrutinize it. He doesn't even think it's science. And if you go and actually look at all of the people there, none of them would put their faces on a website if creationism or intelligent design was seen as a competing paradigm alongside neo-Darwinism. That's not what the Third Way is saying. That is not what the Third Way is saying. Can you read? Are you literate? Or are you just being deliberately obtuse here? Like, it's right there in front of you, my friend. It's just there. I wish this, like, I need to find out when he's going to come to the UK and just get on the mic in the Q&A and just rip this guy to shreds. That's how he's going to learn. Such a coward. No wonder why he doesn't want to debate. Imagine if Rena, right? If you played that video live and then I got to have a conversation with you live and pause like this and point out how you're quote mining, how you're lying. You're actually lying here right now. I'm going to say lying by omission because you're not lying directly by saying he said this when he didn't say this. You're lying by omission. But this is not only a misrepresentation, this is lazy. Remember, this was your way of getting back from the debate. And the debate that you lost in a pathetic way, you weren't even putting up a fight. It was so easy for me, right? And this is your rebuttal? Straw man, unconsciously trying to give him an identity of nobilitis, and now this nonsense? Anyway. Okay, firstly, let's just go back, okay? Oh, man, I wasn't actually playing the video. I was playing something else. Sorry. Apologies, guys. Let's go back. There we go. Is it there? Am I playing the wrong thing? Nope, that's not the right thing. That's the right thing. That's there. Okay.
More than the former, claiming that organisms consciously steer their own evolution.
Okay, you've made some images there, which is like a kiddie image, right? Like it looks silly, and you've put some, you're trying to again build that thing in the unconscious mind. Look at his kiddie sort of theory, but you just referenced the book MIT on purpose. Why didn't you just go through that book? And you had a whole bunch of biologists in there. Why didn't you just go through them? Other than Dennis Noble, there's all these biologists saying the same thing. They're saying the exact same thing that you just covered in that cartoon. So why can't you just open up the book? Read the bloody book, open it up, tell us why it's wrong, rather than just making these kiddie images and trying to plant ideas into people's minds. Man, I want to rip this guy. Like he needs to be humiliated. Actually, you know what? Before I was thinking, yeah, why like okay, I'm gonna make a response to this guy, this that. But actually, no, I need to make people see what charlatan this guy is.
A disavowal of the materialism that creationists despise so much. So, how did Noble go about developing this revolutionary model? Well, he needed some friends to help. Since it's a model regarding evolutionary biology, you'd bet a lot of money that these people would be predominantly evolutionary biologists, right? Well, you'd lose that money real fast. If you go to the people section of
No, you wouldn't lose that money so fast because the first picture you saw there was James Shapiro. Like literally, if he just relied on James Shapiro, who's a geneticist, if he relied on his work alone, that would be enough. In fact, in the debate between Dawkins and Noble, James Shapiro is being referenced again and again. He's the main guy alongside Noble for the third way of evolution. You could have just stuck to James Shapiro. James Shapiro's appeared on my channel many, many times. You could have taken some clips and shown how James Shapiro is wrong. Whatever. You didn't do any of that. You said if you bet money, you will not that he's not going to use evolutionary biologist. But the first picture you have there is of an evolutionary biologist. You've already shown that you're wrong. I don't understand. Like, are you expecting people to just watch your video and hopefully not pause and think, wait, that guy's a biologist, that guy's an evolutionary biologist? There's other evolutionary biologists. There's a whole bunch of evolutionary biologists on the website. Oh, they published a book with MIT, which was just referenced a few minutes earlier. It's absolutely unbelievable how shallow he thinks everyone is.
biologists, right? Well, you'd lose that money real fast. If you go to the people section of his website, you'll find a bunch of engineers.
Do you notice I said engineers first, right? Even though the first picture is of James Shapiro, and the first person that he keeps referencing throughout his debates is James Shapiro. But you can see he's building this image in the unconscious mind.
Psychology.
Again, using psychologists. So, which psychologists are there that he is referring to, which are so important that you wanted to mention them before you mentioned James Shapiro? And isn't psychology a part of evolutionary theory? Isn't it integrated into evolutionary theory? Doesn't it have a say when it comes to evolutionary theory? Are you saying psychology is outside?
A few cell and molecular.
Ooh, okay, so a few. So you're wrong. They are evolutionary biologists there. Okay, why don't you tell us about them and why they're wrong?
Biologists and a whole lot of philosophers.
Okay, philosophers of biology in particular, which is fine. That's not a problem. Dennis Noble himself is a philosopher too. Why is that wrong? I don't understand the philosophy part at all. If he's okay, if Dennis Noble is talking about changing the conceptual metaphysical outlook, changing from a reductive perspective to a process perspective, a whole paradigm shift. This is philosophy. If we're going to, like, let's go back to the two schools here. You got Spinoza, you got Descartes, and way before then, you got Aristotle in terms of his theories of causality. One is reductive, which is Descartes. Spinoza believes in purpose. And these ideas actually went down the centuries into the 20th century, and you can actually see that they got infused within biology. Now, Descartes' reductive ideas, breaking down biology to chemistry to physics to maths, everything in a very simplistic way, a very rudimentary type of central dogma idea, which Denis Noble refers to in his book, Living Systems. Of course, you're going to have to bring in the heavy machinery. You're going to have to bring in the big bulldozers. You're going to have to bring in the cranes, which is to do the conceptual heavy lifting. You're going to have to involve philosophers. You're going to have to involve people. Put it this way, you've got a biologist who's studying bacteria. Those are his targets. He's looking at their metabolism, their movement, their environment, their digestion, and so on and so forth. Okay. It's the job of the philosopher to observe the biologist. How are they coming to conclusions? What paradigm are they using? So I don't understand. Like, what's your beef with philosophers? Like, why are you mentioning that? Like, it's wrong. Anyway, let's carry on.
With this crack squad of rogue trail.
Aha, see, cracked squad. What's the evidence they're cracked? No evidence at all. Pure character assassination. Cracked squad. The cracked squad, which includes Carl Woese, which includes James Shapiro. I just want you to explain why any of the. Okay, James Shapiro has been on my channel many, many times. Fine. Like, why is he a crackpot? He's not a crackpot. He's a prestigious scientist. Like, what's your problem here? You're just name calling and insulting.
Blazers. The Third Way was launched in 2014, and for anyone who is bad with numbers, that was more than 10 years ago. So the obvious question arises, have evolutionary biologists now recognized the error of their ways and abandoned the neo-Darwinian paradigm in favor of physiologist Noble's take on their field? Well, evolutionary biologist Eric Svensson said it best in a review of the history of evolutionary biology when he wrote, "The enthusiasm for their project has, mildly put, not been overwhelming among evolutionary biologists."
Okay, I actually don't disagree with that. And if you notice, that is a factual statement. And there's nothing wrong if you said that. But so far, you led up to this particular point, and it's the first point you've actually shown a biologist who disagrees with them. But his language is formal and cordial, not calling them crackpots. Like, I don't understand. Like, is that the tactic here? Is that the sort of shift? So you call people crackpots, you call people clowns, you build up this image, and then you show a particular quote of a scientist saying that the third way has not been successful. They're a minority. I've also said in the past they're a minority. Denis Noble has said he's a minority. Like, what is that? Nobody disagrees with that. What's the link between what you said and this? You're probably not even going to explain that. You're just going to hope your audience is too simple to realize you need to justify what you said before with this quotation. Are you going to do that? Let's see.
He then added, "The sheer confidence by which some philosophers and critics of contemporary evolutionary biology predict that it will soon be replaced by an entirely new framework, details of which are very unclear, is remarkable, particularly as the majority of evolutionary biologists are not even aware of the existence of TWE and carry on their research as usual."
Yeah, and that is exactly Denis Noble's point. He actually said that in his podcast, in his videos. In fact, Richard Dawkins said that when he was debating Denis Noble. He said, Noble, if you're right, then all of these biologists have been wrong for decades. Noble has openly said that his view is a minority view, and he's trying to change that. And this biologist that you referenced, if we go to his quotation before you put that silly emoji there, what part of this quote would I disagree with? Nothing. I was actually like waiting for you to explain how this quote justifies everything you said earlier. The third way of evolution is a minority view. I say that. Denis Noble says that. Everybody knows that. And that's why they launched the project. I don't understand. What what exactly are you trying to say?
Scientists are not even aware of the existence of TWE and carry on their research as usual. In short, nobody cares. Those who doubt this should join any of the regular evolutionary biology congresses organized by the societies ESEB, European Society for Evolution, and SSE, Society for the Study of Evolution, where little of this forthcoming paradigm shift announced by Noble has been visible during the past decade. Not surprisingly, most evolutionary biologists don't even know who Noble is. His supporters often claim he's some giant in the field of evolution, overturning paradigms, and yet no one in the field even knows he exists. A major reason for this is that Noble doesn't publish in journals that specialize in evolutionary biology. He publishes his ideas on evolution in the Journal of Physiology or the Journal of Experimental Biology.
You have no idea what you're talking about here. You're completely mistaken. So let's slow down here. Why is the Journal of Experimental Biology not prestigious? Or why does that not count? You haven't justified anything here. Like you're just making a bunch of statements and hoping you can hoodwink people. Ah, man. Okay, so he publishes in a bunch of things which no one's ever heard of, blah 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 blah. All right, okay. So we can ask him a question. What is this? Right. Okay, one sec. I need to remove this. Firstly, let's just play his nonsense um, once more, and then I'm going to share the paper of Noble, right?
Paradigms, and yet no one in the field even knows he exists.
So no one in the field knows where he exists. Okay, that's one claim. That's not true at all. Okay, firstly, no one in the field knows who he is. Does that mean he's wrong? No. He had the most famous debate with Richard Dawkins in evolutionary history to date. This is a debate which has gone viral. It's all over the internet. What are you talking about? The most famous debate before this one was Lynn Margulis versus Richard Dawkins at Oxford University, the one that he hosted. And the debates before that were the ones in which Noble was on the side of Dawkins and he was actually hosting when Dawkins was taking on his opponents. You're not really aware of these debates, are you? Biologists do know who he is. If they didn't know who he was, would that mean he's wrong? No. You're just making, again, a bunch of claims. Now, you said, actually, I don't want to put words in your mouth. Let's play what you said, and then we're going to refute you. We're going to enjoy ourselves.
A major reason for this is that Noble doesn't publish in journals that specialize in evolutionary biology.
He doesn't publish in journals that specialize in evolutionary biology, yet he actually references himself the Journal of Experimental Biology, in which evolutionary theories are constantly being published. And the most prestigious journal in the world, the journal that every biologist worth their salt is trying to publish in. It is a journal known as Nature. And there we have it. Denis Noble. It's time to admit that genes are not the blueprint for life. Okay, what does that mean? The view of biology often presented to the public is oversimplified and out of date. Scientists must set the record straight, argues a new book. I actually have access to this, but I can't log in to show you guys. But you can see he's actually published in Nature, and I actually refer to this in my book as well. So what are you talking about? He's been publishing in Nature. Okay, what journal should he publish in? Can you please tell us? Can you give us the exact name? And can you tell us why the Journal of Experimental Biology, which you just showed us, is not good enough? And also, he publishes in journals to do with physiology. Um, Sherlock, there's a bit of a problem with that criticism. He's a physiologist who's arguing physiology guides evolution. So, do you want him to publish in a journal of mathematics? Like, what exactly don't you get about physiology guiding evolution, which is his main argument? Previously, I mean, this is the funny thing. You're not a stupid man because you clearly understand that he has been publishing in certain places. And I'm sure you must have thought, oh, how did he get in MIT? How did he get in Oxford? How did he get in Cambridge? Why don't you look at that and read the content and show us why he's wrong? This statement of this biologist that you showed, Sven, what was his name? Eric Swenson. Okay, how exactly does his statement align with what you said? His statements are it's a minority view in biology and it's not accepted by majority. And Denis Noble actually says the same thing. He says our view is something not accepted by the majority. This is why he's on podcast. This is why he's publishing. This is why he's published in Nature. Look at the title, Brev. Look at the title. It's time to admit that genes are not the blueprint of life. Okay? So genes being the blueprint of life has been the view for decades. He admits that. And he says it's the minority view and he wants to change it and he's publishing in Nature. What do you want? Like, what exactly do you want from him? All right, we're going to have to be patient and we're going to have to go through more nonsense. My God. Denis Noble versus Dawkins, the death of neo-Darwinism. I go over all of this in a lot more detail. But for this video, I'm only going to refer to the parts of my book and his books where these things are being dealt with. And obviously, I don't come up with any research myself. I'm simply copying the works of other biologists and summarizing them and putting it into a coherent narrative. In case he's going to turn around and respond to this video and say that who am I to be making new claims? I'm not making any new claims.
He publishes his ideas on evolution in the Journal of Physiology.
The Journal of Physiology. Okay. Yeah, because he's speaking about physiology guiding evolution. I'm sure, well, I don't know. He probably didn't research this. The Linnaean Society, Carl Linnaeus, such a prestigious society, the Linnaean classification system, which is used all across the world. He's published there too. This guy, man.
Or the Journal of Experimental Biology, or often the journal that he was the editor-in-chief of for many years, Progress in Biophysics and...
Okay, what exactly does that mean? He was the editor-in-chief of... Okay, let me tell you something about the peer review process, okay? In the peer review process, there's something known as the conflict of interest, right? Something very simple. There's a particular process you have to follow when it comes to that. There is no way that Denis Noble, being the editor, can publish his own paper without it going through thorough checks and independent reviews. So I don't know what you're trying to insinuate here. But again, this falls into your bigger image of you trying to show that he's a charlatan, he's a crackpot, he's a clown. And none of those things are true. And it's very nasty what you're doing. Look, I studied NLP. I know exactly what you're trying to do.
Molecular biology. Under Noble's editorship, this journal rapidly became a crackpot journal.
Aha. Now he's attacking the journal itself. Okay. Why would we take you seriously? Cause of Cambrian explosion, terrestrial or cosmic. Okay, no problem. Break down one of their papers and why it's a crackpot paper.
Publishing papers like Cause of Cambrian Explosion, Terrestrial or Cosmic, in which the authors claimed that octopuses came from outer space. It is also published...
James Watson just passed away recently, and alongside Francis Crick, they discovered the structure of DNA. Francis Crick believed life was seeded on this planet and sent down to here using rockets from extraterrestrial beings. Does that mean that his discovery of the double helix structure is incorrect simply because he has the idea of panspermia? The same idea that Richard Dawkins was flirting with? Okay. Well, what's your response to that? Like, what exactly is your response to that? You're now attacking scientific journals. Based on what? Based on what exactly? So if you're gonna take on the bull, you have to take on MIT because they published his stuff. You have to take on Cambridge. You have to take on Oxford. You have to take on all these journals, including Nature and Science. Okay, what's left? Should we all just leave everything and believe Mr. Farina, the failed professor, the person who pretends they are more intelligent than they are, who gets caught unawares, completely hoodwinked in a debate and was domesticated live in front of everyone? Everyone got to see that. We should take you seriously. We should ignore them. No, forget you. Who are you? We're going to carry on following the process.
A series of papers by a pair of creationists, Olin Brown and Dave Hollander, with titles like Neo Darwinism Must Mutate to Survive.
Okay. Go through the paper, refute the paper. It's very easy to call someone a creationist and take them down. Um, why is it wrong?
And Darwinian Evolution Has Become Dogma.
Darwinian evolution has become dogma. Okay. So you do recognize neo Darwinism and Darwinian evolution as being one.
AI can rescue what is salvageable. As Svensson also pointed out, Noble never appears at conferences organized by evolutionary biologists because he knows he'd get completely roasted.
Uh, right. Denis Noble actually went and confronted, not confronted, that's the wrong term, went and openly challenged Richard Dawkins, who's seen as the figurehead of neo Darwinism, and they had a public debate. And this was after Dawkins was basically ghosting him not to debate him for a long time. So I don't know what you're talking about. And there's many conferences that he's been attending, and he's been publishing in peer-reviewed papers. Give us some references from a scientific paper on why he's wrong. Once you do that, you've simply shown that he's wrong on a particular view. You still haven't substantiated him being a crackpot, clown, all these other things that you're saying about him. So you're not getting far. You're not getting far with this nonsense.
Instead, he and his buddies organized their own conferences, like the infamous one held at the Royal Society in 2016.
No, the Royal Society, you're completely misrepresenting this situation again. His own buddy set it up at the Royal Society. Okay, you're just a liar. You're actually just a liar. I'm going to say it flat out. There are times that I can think, this guy is just, confused, or he's not being coherent because he's not aware of these details, but you're actually a liar. The 2016 Royal Society meeting was set up and attended by biologists on both camps, those who believed in neo Darwinism, those who didn't. What is the Royal Society? The Royal Society is a society where Charles Darwin in 1858 first gave his idea, first showed his work. It's the first place he presented. It's the most prestigious society in the world. It goes back a long time. It goes back to what's known as the Invisible College, and it's linked to the discussions between Spinoza and Descartes. We're going back a long time. What are you talking about? You're attacking everyone now in order to salvage your little ego because you got roasted and domesticated in the debate. So you're willing to take on everybody and to try and attack them using your platform, which is a very big platform, simply because you lost a debate. What does that say about you? Why don't you just deal with the fact that you lost rather than attacking all these people and making yourself look ridiculous?
It got a lot of media attention, but which had zero impact on practicing evolutionary biology.
Uh, that was the whole point, to impact the evolutionary field.
In fact, at that very meeting, Noble got personally called out for his bullshit when he gave a talk on some research that another lab had conducted, in which they removed some genes from a species of bacteria that disrupted the development of its flagella. After a few generations, the flagella started working again, and Noble claimed that this was because the organism purposefully responded to the environment by altering its own genome. An audience member, an evolutionary biologist named David Schuker, pulled up the original study on an iPad and shot up his hand. He explained that the study had actually shown that many different regulatory mutations could lead to the reacquisition of the flagellum. The authors concluded, our results demonstrate that natural selection can rapidly rewire regulatory networks. Schuker then concluded, so it's a perfect, beautiful example of rapid neo Darwinian evolution. Ouch. Noble can't even escape embarrassment at his own conferences.
Complete misrepresentation. Noble's view is not as simple as what you're trying to explain. And what you've basically done here, you've taken a massive conference, and in fact, the main meat of the conference you don't actually cover. And what you do is you go off into a side issue about how certain biologists disagree with him. Now, he's open that certain biologists disagree with him, and he explains why they're wrong. You're not even giving his rebuttal back. Now, one of the things that you should actually be aware of is his idea of genetic assimilation, which goes back to Conrad Waddington. This is what this central debate is about. What you need to actually do is to deal with his papers, deal with his arguments. You're doing a pure character assassination. How is it that you can refer to a particular biologist saying, our results demonstrate that natural selection can rapidly rewire regulatory networks? Okay, what does that mean? Like, how exactly does this debunk him? Now, he actually believes that whatever's happening in the external environment impacts the regulatory networks. That's his very view. So I don't understand how you are using this to say that, oh, he's been debunked. Like, what exactly are you doing? Okay, so what would be good, and I don't know whether this is available on the internet, go and find David Schuker's response to Noble and let's go over it. In fact, let's set up a discussion and it'll give both of us time to research what this guy says, what Noble says. But even what you've said here is incomplete and incoherent, doesn't make any sense. So Noble's making a particular claim and a biologist disagrees with him. Well, guess what? Noble actually set it up so that you had two camps. You had the Darwinists and the neo-Darwinists, and you had the third way evolutionists battling it out back and forth. That was the whole discussion. And there was a lot of back and forth. You've taken a snippet of the back and forth and you've said, oh, he was embarrassed at his own conference. And you know, well, that's not what's happened. That's not what happened. I'm going to have to refute you in some detail about this. This is so embarrassing. All right, let's do this, baby. Firstly, you completely lied about the way that this conference was set up. Now let's go to the official Royal Society website and let's see how they described it and how you described it. New trends in evolutionary biology, biological, philosophical, and social science perspectives. Okay. Science discussion meeting organized in partnership with the British Academy by Professor Denis Noble, with all of his credentials, Professor Nancy Cartwright, Professor Patrick Batson, Professor John Dupree, Professor Kevin Lalande. Developments in evolutionary biology and adjacent fields have produced calls for a revision of the standard theory of evolution, although the issues involved remain hotly contested. That was happening throughout the conference. So you just took one snippet where someone disagreed with him and said, oh, he was embarrassed. What exactly are you talking about? Give us evidence that is substantial. It was supposed to be a discussion. Of course, people are going to disagree with Noble, and then he's going to give replies to them. The meeting presented these developments and arguments and encouraged cross-disciplinary discussion, which involved humanities and social sciences in order to provide further analytical perspectives and explore social and philosophical implications, the schedules of talks and biographies, blah, 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 blah. Okay, you got the organizers here, and you got the various sessions. Okay, hopefully you guys can see this. Where am I? Yeah, okay. The first session was actually done by Gert Muller. It's not actually mentioned here. But what I'll do is absolutely unbelievable.
Theory and see.
So this is a video which goes back to what year is it again? 2017. So this is after the conference. So the biologist, for anybody that's interested, that was actually speaking is
how and
this biologist, Gert Muller. So in fact, what you'll find is that Denis Noble wasn't the main guy talking. Other biologists was talking. He was actually hosting the event. He was not the main player. He actually did the opening in which he went over the problems with the current simplistic ideas that they have in the modern neo-Darwinian conception. And then he was arguing for an extended evolutionary synthesis, and he gave his particular viewpoints. So you completely misrepresented how it is set up and what the actual fundamental debate was about as well. But it gets worse. And this is really gonna make you cry now. Oh man. Completely misrepresented the point. So we're gonna have to So your take on it was so off the mark and such a complete misrepresentation. But let's actually see how, say, a neutral platform covers it. Okay. This is the Quantum magazine. Scientists seek to update evolution. Recent discoveries have led some researchers to argue that modern evolutionary synthesis needs to be amended. So this is in 2016. And whatever you get here, right? Let's see a conclusion here. Making evolution, blah, 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 blah. That's actually a picture from the actual new trends in evolutionary biology. Okay. Adding to Darwin, and that's what some of these biologists are basically trying to do. All right. Let me try and find a conclusion here. I'm not going to read the whole thing. Oh my God, this is so long. All right, let's go. There's the conclusion. All right. Aha. Shankar, the same guy you mentioned. Shankar distilled the feelings of a lot of skeptics I talked to at the conference. The high-flying rhetoric about a paradigm shift was, for the most part, unwarranted. They said, okay, so that's the side that disagreed, that you just highlighted a small snippet of. Nor were these skeptics limited to the peanut gallery. Several of them gave talks of their own. So this is what I was saying earlier. I think I'm expected to represent the Jurassic view of evolution, says Futumia. When we got to the podium, Futumia is a soft-spoken biologist at Stonebrook University, so he's a classic neo-Darwinist. In other words, he was the target of many complaints during the meeting that textbooks paid little heed to things like epigenetics and plasticity. So here you can see the neo-Darwinists are getting refuted or not refuted, being criticized by the other side. In effect, Futumia has been invited to tell colleagues why these concepts were ignored. Let's see what other things they say. We must, okay, so this is a direct quote. Who's it from? It's from Futumia. We must recognize that the core principles of the modern synthesis are strong and well supported. So this is the other side speaking. Not only that, he added, but the kinds of biology being discussed at the Royal Society weren't actually all the new. The architects of the modern synthesis were already talking about them some 50 years ago, and there's been a lot of research guided by the modern synthesis to make sense of them. Take plasticity, the genetic variations, blah, blah, blah. If the extended evolutionary synthesis, which is Gerd Muller's baby alongside Massimo Piglucci, if the extended evolutionary synthesis was so superfluous, then why was it gaining enough attention to warrant a meeting at the Royal Society? So this is a sort of question to the neo-Darwinists. And Futumia suggested that its appeal was emotional rather than scientific. It made life an active force rather than a passive vehicle of mutation. So again, this goes back to the idea of purpose and agency in biology, which is and teleology, sorry, which is a central point. I think what we find emotionally or aesthetically more appealing is not the basis of science. Okay, so that's Futumia, who is a neo-Darwinist. Still, he went out of his way to say that the kind of research described at the meeting could lead to some interesting insights about evolution. So even the neo-Darwinist there is saying that the other side has some interesting things to say. But those insights would only arise with some kind of hard work that leads to hard data. There's been enough essays and position papers. Okay. Some members of the audience hang-runged Futumia a bit. Other skeptical speakers sometimes got exacerbated by arguments they didn't feel made sense. But the meeting managed to reach its end of the third afternoon without fistcuffs. It was a full-on debate. You didn't describe any of this. You didn't explain what the context of the debate was. You just tried to say, oh, this guy, Shankar, who is mentioned in this article, he's disagreeing with Noble. Well, that was the whole point. It wasn't embarrassing. It was set up to be a debate. It was set up to be a discussion. Both camps actually were there. This is likely the first of many, many meetings. Lalande told me in September, a consortium of scientists in Europe and the United States received 11 million in funding, including 8 million from the John Templeton Foundation to run 22 studies on the extended evolutionary synthesis. Many of the studies will test predictions that have emerged from the synthesis in recent years. They will see, for example, if species built their own environments. Again, purpose in biology, Denis Noble's ideas, spider webs, wasp nests, and so on, evolve into more species than ones that don't. They will look at whether more plasticity allows species to adapt faster to new environments. It's doing the research, which is what critics are telling us to do, said Lalande. Go find the evidence. So a very balanced sort of article going over this. So what exactly, I want you to go back to the conference and to correct yourself. You need to correct yourself. You made a whole bunch of claims about the conference, which are completely false. You just said, oh yeah, he just set up this thing himself with a bunch of, no, it was the Royal Society. A meeting at the Royal Society. He's a member of the Royal Society. He's a fellow of the Royal Society, the most prestigious society in the world. You completely misrepresented. You said, oh, Shankar disagreed with him on this point. Yeah, actually, everybody disagreed with each other. And in fact, Noble wasn't the main person speaking. There was a whole bunch of biologists on this side and that side, and they were going back and forth. Like, what exactly did you bring to the table about this meeting that makes you think that you've provided something really powerful against Denis Noble? You've simply said, oh, this guy disagreed with him. Okay, fine. I have to do a lot of work simply to educate you. All right. All right. All right. Do you guys remember how I mentioned Gert Muller and how he started? So this is from scienceandculture.com. The opening presentation at the Royal Society conference by one of those world-class biologists, Austrian evolutionary theorist Gert Muller, underscored exactly Meyer's point. Muller's opened the meeting by discussing several of the fundamental explanatory deficits of the modern synthesis. By the way, Muller doesn't. Uh, I'll go into this later on. Um, Muller opened the meeting by discussing several of the fundamental explanatory deficits of the modern synthesis, that is, textbook neo Darwinian theory. Uh, According to Muller, the yet unresolved problems uh, include those of explaining phenotypic complexity, phenotypic novelty, non-gradual form modes of transition. Okay, now what you'll find is that his opening speech was the opening salvo, and everyone back and forth. Intelligent design proponents were there and they wrote about it, but they were in the audience. They weren't on the podium because both sides, the neo Darwinists and the third wave evolutionists, do not consider them to be valid scientists, right? That they don't consider that to be science at all. Unlike what Farina was trying to insinuate, that Noble sees that as equal paradigms. No, he doesn't see as equal paradigms at all. So total misrepresentation, and anybody can go back, new trends in evolutionary biology, they can look at just how much of a distortion Farina did. And we will carry on and see what else we can respond to here.
The environment by altering its own genome. An audience member, an evolutionary biologist named David Schuker, pulled up the original study on an iPad and shot up his hand. He explained that the study had actually shown that many different regulatory mutations could lead to the reacquisition of the flagellum.
Okay, so for anybody that's interested, I go over this in a lot more detail in my book, not the point of Schucker, but lots of backs and forths between Dawkins and Noble, because they actually go over all of this from a broad perspective. And that was in 2022. 2016 is when this conference actually took place. So things have actually advanced beyond that. So nothing that Dave Farina is saying right now undermines the points that I made in the debate or the points I've made so far. And even Shucker's points right now do not substantiate what Farina's position actually is. So far, what has he actually done? He's given me lots of ammunition to actually respond to. So I have to thank him.
The authors concluded, our results demonstrate that natural selection can rapidly rewire regulatory networks. Schuker then concluded, so it's a perfect, beautiful example of rapid neo-Darwinian evolution. Ouch, Noble can't even escape embarrassment at his own conferences.
Okay, so again, going back to NLP, going back to the unconscious mind, give us evidence that he was embarrassed. He actually set up this entire debate. It was supposed to be a debate. What was his response? What was Gert Muller's opening response? How was it responded to by the other side? Everybody that's written about this 2016 conference said it was a heated discussion amongst biologists, and they were disagreeing about the same data. The same way Denis Noble and Richard Dawkins are reading the same papers and giving their own interpretations. What exactly about this? What exactly about this don't you get? Okay, so here's what I don't understand. You took a complete bad take on the conference as if it was just set up by a bunch of friends having a jolly, folks. You tried to make it look like, oh, this guy, he pointed out Denis Noble's wrong. He left it there. You forgot to mention that Denis Noble set up a debate between everybody, and he wasn't even the main speaker there. And everybody was refuting each other for a few days, and they were disagreeing about the same data. You just, like, this is called pure lying by omission, totally misleading your audience. How exactly is it that what Shoka said there totally discards what he's saying? How, like, it was a debate and a discussion. Everyone's going back and forth, they're disagreeing with each other. What have you actually achieved by this? I know what you've done. You've basically given a view that it was, oh, it's just nothing, some conference, and Noble was embarrassed. No, I don't think Noble was embarrassed because Firstly, there's no footage of the event, so we can't verify that. I don't know where exactly did you get that. But all of the arguments that Shaka is making and all the neo-Darwinists are making, that those arguments were then used in the 2022 debate, which Richard Dawkins then had to cover in a chapter 2 years later in 2024. Both times, Noble completely addressed these issues. Completely. Okay? My book's based on that. So you've achieved nothing. You've actually achieved nothing. You've shown you don't understand what this discussion is about. You don't understand what this debate is about. You shouldn't be at the same table discussing these things. And frankly, we need to have a debate. We need to talk. There's actually, what I want to do is, I'll be honest with you, right? I want a podcast. I want a podcast, and I want to have a series of podcasts with you. And I want to you get me a neutral host. Me and you will sit and we will go through scientific papers. We will actually read the stuff. We will actually go through everything with a fine comb, because I want to show people just how much of a charlatan you are and just how much of a liar you are. Just how you can lie with such a straight face is absolutely unbelievable. And this is why you don't want to debate me in person. But anyway, let's carry on.
So, as you can see, very few evolutionary biologists take Noble seriously, despite the fact that he's had over 10 years to make his case.
He himself admits that majority of biologists don't agree with him. So you're pretending like you've discovered something that no one knows.
Of course, crackpots never simply admit defeat.
Nope, there's nothing about what he's saying which is crackpottery. You haven't established that, but you're just using these images to get into the subconscious mind.
There must be a reason that no one accepts their brilliance. Like any true conspiracy theorist, Noble claims we just need to follow the money. The neo-Darwinian paradigm dominates academia, so it soaks up all the money, and no one is willing to challenge the status quo, no matter how wrong it is, and no matter what is to be gained by forging a new path. It's infantile.
I interact now with a whole group of around a dozen younger academics working in trying to get the funding for the experiments they want to perform. And almost universally, they say that most of their grants are rejected. And the reason is very simple. It is that the rejection will be on the basis that it just simply disagrees with standard theory. Well, we have to break out of that mindset.
This is what electric universe grifters say about gravity.
Wait. You can't. Okay, wait a minute. What's wrong with the point he just made? What exactly with this? What exactly don't you get about big science? What exactly don't you get about funding? The Human Genome Project cost billions, and it was based upon a foundational falsehood. It was based on the idea of gene-centric view. It was based on something that Noble has been challenging for many, many years. And this whole idea that a gene for this, a gene for that, and why it's failed, all of this stuff, I actually covered this in quite some detail. So there's a claim that he makes, and he's arguing for that claim. Okay, fine, go look how much the Human Genome Project costs and how well it was funded. And it's very well known that scientific research is affected by research grants. You just went straight into the claim and straight into he's a crackpot. Where's the connection? This is a very, very lazy attempt. So I want to have a separate discussion with you just on this, because I'm sure you don't know the details of the Human Genome Project and how much it costs and why it impacts people to actually do research in a particular direction.
That mindset.
This is what electric universe grifters say about gravity. This is what Eric Weinstein says about the entirety of theoretical physics. This is what unqualified cranks peddling supplements on the internet say about nutrition and molecular biology. This is what all charlatans say who want to elevate their bullshit to the status of well-established and universally accepted scientific principles.
Nope, that's not true at all. The other people that you're referring to right now, right? The other people that you're referring to, I don't know their situation. So let's just stick to Denis Noble. Let's stop doing the character assassination. I'm giving you something to research, the Human Genome Project. And in fact, Denis Noble refers to the cost of the Human Genome Project in the debate with Dawkins. Why didn't Dawkins respond in the way that you did? Go back and watch that debate between Dawkins and Noble. Then you'll understand where you're going wrong. Well, actually, I don't think you want to understand. You just want to build a picture.
The problem isn't that they're objectively wrong, it's that the man is keeping them down. Ironically, there is some truth to Noble's sentiment about following the money, and when we follow his money, we find that it comes from the Templeton Foundation, which has aggressively funded pseudoscientific nonsense for decades.
Okay, these are statements. Provide evidence for that. Foundations give money to projects. What's wrong with that? What is wrong with taking money from the Templeton Foundation? Why is that wrong? There's foundations all across the world funding research. You can't just say, okay, they're getting money from foundation to publish research. The question is, how did that research get published? How did Nature publish his stuff? How did MIT publish his stuff? How did Oxford publish his stuff? How did Cambridge publish his stuff? How did the Journal of Physiology publish his stuff? How did the Journal of Science, Science, just the name Science, how did they publish his stuff? How did this happen? That's what you need to answer. And this is not going to help you at all. I myself would be very happy to take a funding from John Templeton Foundation. Doesn't mean I can actually publish in, say I have a crackpot idea and they're going to look at the crackpot idea and be like, oh, we're not going to fund that. It's not going to get published. But say there's another foundation called the Dave Farina Foundation, right? And they happen to give me $1 million to publish some crackpot ideas. It doesn't mean those ideas are going to be published by Oxford and Cambridge and MIT and Science Direct and Nature. Like, you haven't actually made a point yet. Like, so far in this discussion, you haven't said anything that I can grab onto and I can deal with in any academic way. Okay. So, like I said before, all of those things, right? If we look at, oh, I didn't play it. Sorry. Go back.
Pseudoscientific nonsense for decades, leading most serious scholars to boycott them. The Foundation displays an obsession with some alleged intersection of theology and science, topics like free will. It's just blatantly obvious that the Foundation's purpose is to paint religious dogma as having some kind of scientific basis for the purpose of artificially intellectualizing regressive theocratic politics, which they have also done by repeatedly funding far-right evangelical politicians like Rick Santorum.
Well,
you still haven't answered. Okay, John Templeton Foundation, they give funding to scientists. How did that stuff end up in Oxford and Cambridge and MIT and all these places? You're the conspiracy theorist here. You're the one that's saying, oh, all of this stuff came from, it's the genetic fallacy. If there's an atheist foundation giving funding to atheist speakers, which it does in the past, and say for research or whatever, and then the research gets published, you can't say that the published research, peer-reviewed research from prestigious universities is false simply because of where the money's coming from. And you still, and you can't have it both ways. You can't have it like, oh, he's saying it's to do with big money and therefore he's a crackpot. And then the Human Genome Project, which has a lot of money and has funded a lot of research, he's pointing that out as a problem and you're saying that's also a problem. Like, how does that make any sense? You can't have it both ways. You're complaining in the same manner that he's complaining with. Why is it your complaint's valid and his complaint's not valid? I want you to think about this for a second. I know this is a bit difficult for you to think about. You're complaining, why is his funding coming from John Templeton Foundation or whatever? And he's saying, why, I mean, science is going in a particular direction is because it's getting funding from, say, the Human Genome Project, right? To go in a particular way, or that project was funded on a particular foundation, a gene-centric reductive perspective. So your idea is valid, but his idea is not valid. How does that make sense? How exactly does that make sense? Okay, let's just say evil aliens are funding the Human Genome Project and evil aliens are funding Denis Noble. How do you explain his stuff being published in peer-reviewed papers? How? By Oxford, MIT, Cambridge. How? You just don't get it. You simply don't know how to address these things.
I think you have to ask the question, where is the money?
Anyway, it goes without saying that the rest of this video will be devoted to rigorously dismantling Noble's scientific claims. But for those who are not well versed in biology,
well, you're not versed at all. After all that nonsense, you want people to take you seriously.
we should point out that this background information is enough to discredit him by itself.
There you go. Remember what I said, guys, right? All this time, he's set up to pre-frame you to think of him in a negative light and throw shade on him before he says anything. It's a very clever tactic. And it's been exposed. And when it's exposed, it's not clever. It just looks really desperate.
In short, he's become a pseudo-intellectual crank funded by the Templeton Foundation, writing well outside his expertise, who oversaw the publication of papers that claimed octopuses come from outer space, has never once published in an evolution-specific journal, and has been caught in real time either deliberately misrepresenting or egregiously botching a biology paper.
Okay, none of those things are true, and you didn't substantiate them, except that he's funded by the Templeton Foundation. I'll grant you that. But that doesn't lead to any of the other things that you've said. So let's go over this. Pseudo-intellectual crank. Nope. You haven't shown that in any way, shape, or form. Makes claims outside of his expertise. That's based upon your foundational misunderstanding of where physiology is. Are you saying, okay, I'm going to put it to you in a very simple way. Is physiology outside of evolution, of the evolutionary paradigm? It's a very simple question. Is physiology outside of the evolutionary paradigm? If the answer is yes, then you're basically saying a subfield of biology is distinct. Why is it distinct? If the answer is no, it is part of evolutionary biology, then Denis Noble is dealing with evolution because he's dealing with physiology. Hence why I even referred to a paper when I was having a discussion with you, which is Physiology Guides Evolution. And that's why he's writing in journals to do with physiology. Now, James Shapiro, his entire argument is based upon a lot of Shapiro's work, who's a geneticist, and he's been publishing for decades. Like, what exactly do you want? Like, journals to do with genetics, you'll find Shapiro all over the place. And he openly says, my work is based upon Shapiro. And you can see my interviews with him as well. We are getting nowhere. Okay, what's the other claims?
Now we're going to dissect what's represented.
Okay, saw publication of papers about octopuses being from outside of space. Okay, fine. There are people who published ideas about life originating from extraterrestrial beings. Does that mean that the very publishing house is completely discarded because they have this idea? No, because this is naturalism. It falls within naturalism, so it's allowed. So Francis Crick's discovery of the double helix structure of the DNA, let's throw that out, okay? Let's use your logic here now, boy. Francis Crick believed in panspermia, right? He believed that life was sent to Earth on rockets from outer space. Richard Dawkins flirted with the idea too in the No Intelligence Allowed debate, the documentary. Okay, so Richard Dawkins has published with Oxford, and Francis Crick has published all over the place and discovered the double helix. So the publishing houses that they're involved in, or they referred to in terms of, say, stick to Crick to be simple. Do we discard the entire publishing house because Crick has an idea which is strange? That's not the way science works, bruv. That's not the way it works. Anyway, what else? Has never published in an evolution journal. I don't know how to repeat myself a million times. Nature. He's published in Nature. He's published in Science. He's published with Oxford and Cambridge, and he's he cannot publish, say, a paper about physiology guiding evolution in the Journal of Genetics, because his argument is an argument from physiology. What don't you understand about that? You are clutching at straws. This is very desperate. But it doesn't make a difference, because you are basically, and this is good, you're basically throwing all of those journals under the water, right? That's fine. People are going to look at those journals, and then they're going to look at you and your YouTube channel and your silly emojis, and they're going to think, okay, should we believe these journals? Should we believe the Royal Society? Okay, let's try another way. Which journal did or society did Darwin publish his theory with first? The Royal Society. Where did Denis Noble and the people who agree with him first make a huge landmark in terms of their ideas? The Royal Society. Okay, so the same criticism that you have of Noble, you can have of Darwin. Exactly the same. And Darwin never heard of genetics. Darwin never said random mutations. He said random variations, because genetics was something that was discovered afterwards. I'm sure you know that, because that's like the modern synthesis. And what else do you have? Let's see. Has been caught misrepresenting or botched biology papers. I don't think so. You didn't substantiate that. All you simply did is show that Shankar, or whatever the name of the biologist was, disagreed on the interpretation that Noble has of that paper. And the whole conference was about that. In fact, if we take your line of reasoning, has been caught misrepresenting or caught, what's the exact words here? Has been caught misrepresenting or botching biology papers. Okay. Dawkins cannot be accused of that, and nor can Noble. But in their debate, they were totally disagreeing. They were saying, yeah, but it doesn't mean that. 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 If you watch that debate, that's what it is. So no one is lying. They're having different interpretations of the same data. This is known as underdetermination. This is a particular problem in the philosophy of biology. So let me give you an example. You have to spend $5, and you have to buy an apple, and you have to buy an orange, one each. Now, use that. You have to use the full $5. You have to buy an orange, you have to buy an apple. Now, you may go out and buy 4 oranges, 1 apple. You may buy 3 oranges, 2 apple, and so on and so forth. The data that you have to spend $5, the data that you have to buy an orange and an apple, is underdetermined. You cannot use that data to come to a conclusion that this is the definitive answer. There's different inferences based upon the same data. That's what was happening. You showed it like, oh, he got caught lying, or no, you're the one that's been lying. You've been lying consistently in this video. And this video is going to be a huge humiliation for you when it goes live. So you're the one that actually has to deal with the liar idea. Why is it that a debate, people can't disagree about the data, and then you can try and use that as a way of character assassination? You don't even, you didn't, by the way, so far you haven't even explained genetic assimilation and somatic hypermutation, all of the things you're unaware of in the debate, and you're just doing this stuff. Anyway. I ain't gonna listen to this nonsense. Let me put on ×2. Is this an ad? Is this an ad, you sellout? Oh man. So he's basically pushing out. Well, yeah, I wasn't even playing it. It was an ad, basically. He's basically pushing out an ad, and so I skipped the ad.
Go for it. Go to consensus.app and jump straight into your first search today. Okay, back to Denis Noble. To begin the debunking, here's a table that compares what Noble thinks neo-Darwinism claims and what the third way proposes. To your first search today. Okay, back to Denis Noble. To begin the debunking, here's a table that compares what Noble thinks neo-Darwinism claims.
Okay. And he's published a paper on every single one of them on the right. Yeah. So the paper, organisms have intrinsic agency, MIT, mutations are guided by organisms, in the evolution is guided by physiology. Epigenetics proves Lamarck right. He's using James Shapiro's stuff, natural genetic engineering. Central dogma is false. That's been known for decades. Weismann barrier doesn't exist. He's actually published on this. Genes aren't the only thing that matters. That's actually in the Nature reference I gave earlier.
And what the third way proposes. Noble relies on two tactics. First, erecting a false straw man version of neo-Darwinism, which includes a mix of
Okay, attack a straw man of neo-Darwinism. The definition of neo-Darwinism that Noble actually uses is actually published by Cambridge University. So, and I use that definition as well. So, no, he didn't use a straw man.
understandings and outright lies. Second, proposing an alternative that is infused with a bunch of pseudoscientific mumbo-jumbo.
You haven't substantiated why it's pseudoscience. If it's pseudoscience, why is it published by Oxford and Cambridge and MIT and Nature and all these other journals, scientific journals, over 700 journals in which you have Denis Noble publishing? And later on in his life, the last decade, he's actually published a whole bunch of papers. No, it's not pseudoscience. If it was pseudoscience, he wouldn't get past the reviewers.
The precise kind of nonsense that has been promoted and funded by the Templeton Foundation for decades, and which will be totally unrecognizable from the type of propaganda that organizations like Discovery Institute promote. The theme can be summarized as, life can't be the result of naturalistic mechanistic processes like standard evolutionary theory contends. It must have intrinsic meaning and purpose, a purpose that is intended to...
Denis Noble believes in naturalism. So I don't know why you're coming up with this nonsense. He believes in pure naturalism. Life must have intrinsic meaning and purpose. That's a view that's shared by the say Discovery Institute, and is shared by some people in biology, but that has nothing to do with what Denis Noble is trying to do. He's not bringing in purpose and agency and meaning from a Platonic perspective. He's saying it's internal to the organism. So he's using an Aristotelian perspective. This is what I don't understand about this guy. Okay, let me just explain the difference. The third way of evolution is using the latest contemporary research to come up with views which fall within naturalism. So what this guy is trying to do, look, Intelligent Design, Discovery Institute, they actually disagree with third way, and third way disagree with them, and neo-Darwinists disagree with both. Okay, in my discussions, you can see I've even had this cleared with Scott Turner, who's a third way evolutionist. What he's doing now is he's just trying to throw third way into the Discovery Institute camp and trying to deal with it as one, but they're two different paradigms and they disagree with each other. They actually criticize each other. Unbelievable. This guy has no idea what he's talking about.
The implication of the Christian God, even though that is not outright stated. Let's dissect each of these points line by line. In doing so, we will show that Noble's entire third way program is just a confused, factually vacuous, bumbling attempt at attacking one of the most well-established ideas in the entire history of science.
No, he's published it. Like, again, just just keep repeating the same lies again and again and again and again, hoping it'll stick.
First things first, we're going to contextualize Noble's term neo-Darwinism. It's not worth going into the convoluted history of where these labels come from. So even
convoluted, like you got it wrong for decades, right? In terms of the distance between them in decades, you had no idea. I'm glad you're not going over this and fixing your mistake, because it's going to make you look even more stupid.
No, it's not entirely accurate. In this video, we're going to use this term to refer to standard evolutionary theory.
Hey, wait a minute. Wait a minute. That's what I'm doing. That's exactly what I was doing. So, okay. I guess he's changed his tone. All right, fine.
As in what is presently accepted by most publishing biologists. This is the only way to proceed with this criticism, because if Noble is really just attacking a historical version of evolutionary...
No, he's not. That's why he did the 2016 conference, which you completely misrepresented. You ignored Gert Muller, who's the main opening guy, and the phenotypic complexity and novelty and non-transitional modes of transition and all those things. You ignored everything, and you just went straight into this. No, he's not using the 1950s. In fact, he's using stuff which is last couple of years, even stuff from like a year ago. And you can see that in my book. He's using contemporary stuff, not stuff from the 50s.
Biology, who cares? We already know that we understand evolution better now than we did 70 years ago. We care about the current science.
Strawman. He's not saying total lie and strawman, but anyway.
So we will treat Noble's rhetoric as an attack on current science. If he wants to argue...
It's not an attack on current science. he's trying to update evolutionary theory.
With ghosts, he can knock himself out, but that would be a little pointless for him to enact and for us to examine. So onwards we go. Next, let's discuss his claim that evolutionary biology is gene-centric. Is this really true? The problem we immediately face is that Noble is using this term incorrectly, and so we have to do a little bit of educating before we can even answer this. In evolutionary biology, gene-centric is the perspective that your genes are ultimately what survive across long enough time spans to cause appreciable evolutionary change. Obviously, an organism's body and all its cells don't persist. Thus, evolution can be studied at the level of the gene, as it's ultimately the target of natural selection. This doesn't mean that your body, what Richard Dawkins in The Selfish Gene refers to as...
Aha! Thank God. Thank God you went back to your mate, right? Because now what I can do, and you've given me this beautiful opening, I can simply say, why are you not aligned to what Dawkins is saying about Denis Noble? His responses are not your responses. He actually understands his position and he understands where he's coming from, even though he disagrees. Why is it that none of the things that you're saying right now, I dare you to send your video to Richard Dawkins and say, please, can you approve this for me? Please, can you say that what I've said in this video represents you and represents Noble? Just do that. Farina, just do that. Send this video to Richard Dawkins and say, okay, can you endorse this? On the minimum, what that will achieve is that will show you two are aligned. But Richard Dawkins doesn't deal with him in the way that you've dealt with him because he knows he can't do that. He actually understands the science. He actually understands these are real issues. He actually understands there's a lot of conceptual work to be done. There's a lot of research that has to be debated and discussed. There's a lot of inferences which are possible based upon the same data. He understands these things, which you don't. So I dare you to send your video to Richard Dawkins and see if he endorses it. He will never endorse it.
The vehicle doesn't matter. Think about it like this. Imagine a hypothetical lizard in which a developmental hiccup occurred such that it hatched with a little red stripe on its head. It doesn't have a gene for this stripe. It's just the result of embryonic development. Let's say a lot of the other lizards find it attractive, and so this red striped lizard has lots of offspring, but none of them are born with this red stripe. While it helped this lizard in one generation, in the next, the benefit is gone. This is why the vehicle can be favored, but if that vehicle is not a reflection of genes, which are the only things that actually persist across generations, evolutionary change doesn't occur. This is what gene centrism actually is, but it isn't what Noble thinks it is. He thinks genes...
No. Nope. That's not his view. What you're doing here is you're completely misunderstanding. There is a very direct link between Francis Crick's formulation of the gene-centric view, which was then reformulated some years later, and Denis Noble goes over the entire thing. It's if his view is wrong, why is it that in the book Biological Relativity, which is published by Cambridge, he goes over all of these things and how these historical ideas went? Why is it that him and Dawkins agree about what the central dogma is, agree about what neo-Darwinism is? They agree on that. They just disagree about whether it's wrong or right. So what you're trying to say here, just look, it's so easy for you. Look, it's so easy for you. Just go and get Dawkins to leave a comment and say that he approves your video and the content of your video. I don't think he's going to have the patience to watch your nonsense, but say he does, that will be a big win because it'll show I'm wrong. It'll show that Dawkins actually endorses the view that Denis Noble is who you are saying he is and that he doesn't understand these things and the way that you've completely misrepresented him. Getting a phone call. Sorry, guys. Sorry, one sec. Yeah. He's never going to endorse this nonsense that you're coming up with.
Centrism just means that the entire vehicle is determined 100% by genes. That's why...
Yeah, please contact Cambridge University and let them know that nonsense has been published. And they're going to turn around and say to you, nonsense wasn't published. This is credible stuff by a credible scientist. So what you're doing right now is useless. Why don't you send an email to them and say that you've given authorship of a book to a man under the name of Cambridge University and he's misrepresenting science? They are one of the best publishers in the world. They would not allow anything to go out unless it's been through some thorough checks. What you're doing right now is you're throwing all of these publishing houses and all of these journals under the bus simply to recover from a debate in which you lost.
He claims that a failure of neo-Darwinism is the fact that many genomic studies of complex human diseases like schizophrenia and Alzheimer's have not found a clear genetic basis. If you define gene-centric as having 100% genetic basis, then sure, this would falsify it, but no one actually believes that. There are genes which guide organismal development, but they are not the only factor.
Yeah, he already says that. He actually says that if you listen to him. So you're pretending he doesn't know that. No, he knows that because he's a real professor, unlike you.
Go all the way back to the 1920s to the work of R.A. Fisher and Sewell Wright, two of the leading figures of the modern synthesis,
Which he refers to.
show that no neo-Darwinist ever believed in Noble's interpretation of gene centrism.
That's not true. You can see all of this in the definitions that he lays out in the book Biological Relativity. So this is actually quite easy. All I simply need to do, all of what he's saying right now is covered in this book. And he's pretending like Noble doesn't know what he's talking about. Actually, he doesn't know what he's talking about. This book, which I purchased early this year, you can see everything there. You will see in these pages, he goes over the definitions, all of the points that were being made earlier. Did I share my screen? Yeah. All of the points that were being made earlier where he compared the third way to the gene-centric view or the neo-Darwinian view, it's all covered in this book. So he's saying he doesn't know this, he doesn't know this, he doesn't know this. Yes, he does. It's all covered in his book. And I'm sure this guy's never read his book. So there you have it. It's a complete inversion, projection, because he doesn't know what he's talking about. He wants to say that Denis Noble doesn't know what he's talking about.
Fisher invented the word variance in 1918 to explain how traits were determined by genetic, environmental, and developmental variances, and he showed mathematically how we could calculate the contribution of each. Today, we call this idea heritability. It's as if Noble knows absolutely nothing about what evolutionary biologists...
No, he covers it in his book. He covers it in his research. He covers it in his talks. In fact, this very talk, I remember this talk. If you go and watch this one, it's all there. Like, he knows what he's talking about. You haven't provided any evidence he doesn't know this stuff.
Actually do. He likes to claim that evolutionary biology is gene-centric because it makes it sound reductionistic, which has become a naughty word among philosophers and, of course, the funding board of the Templeton Foundation. So we have just conclusively demonstrated that neo-Darwinism was never a gene-centric
No, you didn't.
theory in the manner that Noble implies.
Okay. So genes created us mind and body. This is unbelievable. Genes created us mind and body is the main neo-Darwinian narrative inside Dawkins' book, which you just showed earlier. You literally just showed his book, wherever it is. You just showed it. So you're wrong.
Then sure, this would falsify it, but no one actually believes that. There are genes which guide organismal development, but they are not the only factor. We can go all the way back to the 1920s. Mathematically, how we could calculate and influence the human barrier is the simple idea that neo-Darwinian paradigm for a gene-centric theory in the manner that Noble implies. But does it propose that the environment can't influence the genes? Noble claims that the neo-Darwinian paradigm contends that genes are protected from the environment by the Weismann barrier. He will say that new research in transgenerational epigenetic inheritance has overturned this, but the neo-Darwinists just won't give it up. Let's dissect this ridiculous claim as well. First, the Weismann barrier is the simple idea that what happens to your body doesn't typically influence your germline cells or gametes. If you lose a finger in an accident and then have a child, that child won't be born missing that finger. But if you inherit a mutation from your parents that causes you to not develop a fifth finger, you can pass that on. The logic here is that information flows from the germ cell to the somatic cells, but not the other way around. And it is ultimately genes in the germ cells that are immortal, in Weismann's words, because they persist across generations, whereas body cells all die. In animals, this is still largely true to this day.
Okay. Again, he's completely misrepresented the argument here. The Weismann experiment with cutting off the tails of mice, the argument is not that a genetic mutilation, sorry, not genetic, a mutilation is not inherited. It's the argument that functionality is inherited. Now, he's completely misunderstood the entire picture. The Weismann barrier is that the germ cells are protected from the environment. It's a very simple idea. That's why they call it the Weismann barrier. He's saying, no, epigenetics actually directly leads over generations to genetic change, real genetic change. Conrad Waddington, remember I referred to that in the debate, and that's what he uses. So, like, what you're trying to claim he doesn't understand the Weismann barrier, and you're trying to claim that the Weismann barrier is intact from what I can see so far. None of those things are true. This is a really poor attempt. Like, imagine having 3 million subs, and this is your level of research. Unbelievable. Oops.
About the quadrillions of mutations that happen in your somatic cells over the course of your life. All the abrasions, warts, freckles, liver damage, and everything else that you subject your body to. Virtually none of that will be transmitted to your offspring. This is biology 101. In plants and unicellular organisms, the Weismann barrier doesn't apply, and this was known even in Weismann's day. This is because A plant's germ cells form from vegetative meristems, so they can be influenced by somatic changes. Obviously, unicellular organisms don't have a separation of somatic and germline cells, since they are just one cell, so this does not apply to them either. How can it be that neo-Darwinism relies on the absolute nature of the Weismann barrier, as Noble claims, if a large chunk of biodiversity was known even in Weismann's time to not possess such a barrier? Is he
that was exactly his point. His point was that Weismann was out of date even in his lifetime. And what you forgot to actually mention is Denis Noble makes the claim that Weismann's ideas are out of line with Darwin's ideas, who did believe the environment could actually impact the cells, the germ cells. So the ideas that he used during the debate with Dawkins is known as Darwin's gemmules. So Darwin's gemmules was the idea that you have these little floating particles and they go around the body, see what's happening, and then go to the germ cell. So yes, you are partially correct that this was known during the time of Weismann, but you are misrepresenting Noble. Noble's not saying that those things were not known. He's saying that Weismann went ahead with his idea anyway and it became popularized, and he is wrong. And he's actually published a paper on this, which you can actually see with the Forbes interview. That's what made him really popular, that particular Forbes interview. So what exactly are you doing right now? You're literally putting together an incoherent and incomplete narrative. I'm literally thinking to myself, like, did this guy think this through? Did he plan this? It's unbelievable. And why is it that none of these points that you're making are actually being made by Dawkins in his debate with him? The points that are being made is they are disagreeing about the same data. But your particular point, in which you're saying he's got everything wrong, you're doing it from a perspective of pure ignorance. You're coming to the same conclusion as, say, a critic of the third way. You're coming to the same conclusion without understanding what his position is, without understanding why the critics of third way disagree with the third way. And you are just basically coming up with a whole bunch of incoherent, redundant ideas, and then referring to the critics of the third way and then saying, yeah, I'm in the same boat as them and this is how I arrived. But your arrival shows you're ignorant, and you're making claims that the third way critics don't actually make about Denis Noble and the third way evolutionists. Do you see the levels of compounded heedlessness and ridiculousness, in fact, when it comes to the way that you've done this video? It'd be better for you, shall I tell you what would be better for you? To get a whole bunch of critics of the third way and literally read out what they said and end the video. That would have been better. This is just embarrassing because you're making multiple claims which you cannot substantiate.
Pretending that biologists don't know what plants and bacteria are?
There is a barrier, sometimes called the Weismann barrier, and it is absolute. Nothing can go
That's the Forbes interview, I believe.
across it.
As you can see, he clearly means to convey that biologists believe the barrier to be absolute or impassable. This simply is not true. He's either deliberately lying or he doesn't actually.
No, he's not lying. You don't understand what's going on here. You haven't even mentioned. You haven't even mentioned the Darwin's gemmules. You haven't mentioned the extracellular vesicles that he refers to, which are supposed to be Darwin's gemmules. You haven't referred to any of this, and it's unbelievable. It's absolutely unbelievable.
Understand this concept. Furthermore, we've learned a lot since 1892 when Weismann proposed this idea. Again, evolutionary biologists aren't just reading dusty old books and doing no original research. By the 1940s, neo-Darwinists had discovered what are called maternal effects, which is when.
Wait a minute. You said by the 1940s neo-Darwinists, but the mod. Okay, firstly, why don't you make yourself clear like I did? Neo-Darwinism, 19th century, upgraded to modern synthesis by the 1920s to 40s, and then just call that Neo-Darwinism. That was my narrative. You were saying I was wrong. Do you remember that? And now you're using the language that I'm using? Like, can you make it clear at least you agree with me when it comes to definitions?
The mother's egg cell influences the traits of her children independent of their genotype. Later, we learned that the cause of this was epigenetics, which refers to the different factors that influence gene expression without directly altering the DNA sequence.
Fantastic, because that's what I said in the debate. And let's see if you're going to talk about genetic assimilation. because that's the next step. Waddington, remember him?
Often relating to histone modification, which are the proteins that DNA coils around and which influence what genes are available for transcription. So at least since the 1940s, when Denis Noble was a child, neo-Darwinists accepted that the Weismann barrier isn't absolute. But
so this is his exact point. His point is that the Weismann barrier is no longer a barrier, and we've known this for decades. You're simply restating his position and pretending like he didn't know those things. He has been saying this all along. If you watch his talks and go through his books, he's been saying we've known this for decades. We simply are sticking to an old paradigm.
that doesn't mean it's something totally irrelevant. Again, children aren't born missing fingers if their parents lost some. This is true.
Denis, this is a complete straw man. This is a complete straw man. Just look at this image. Children aren't born missing fingers if their parents lost some. Who said that? Did Denis Noble ever say that? Did he ever say that a mutation is inherited? He never, ever made this claim. You've just made a complete straw man of his position. His position is that adaptations, functional adaptations, can be inherited, which we know of now, which you've just admitted earlier. And now you're pretending that, okay, you cut off a finger and then it doesn't come in the next generation. And like, who said that? Who said that? What are you talking about? Like, do you understand how much of a misrepresentation this actually is? And you're just repeating your same misrepresentations again and again, as if they're going to stick.
So what does Noble say about this? He claims that since the Weismann barrier isn't absolute, it allows the flow of information to go from the environment back into the DNA, since genes aren't fully isolated. To Noble, this violates the so-called central dogma of molecular biology. This reveals the stunning fact that Noble doesn't seem to know what the central dogma even is.
He covers all of this in his book. You're pretending like he doesn't know this. I've read his stuff. I don't know what you're talking about.
1970, Francis Crick defined it as follows. The central dogma of molecular biology deals with a detailed residue-by-residue transfer of sequential information. It states that such information cannot be transferred back from protein to either protein or nucleic acid.
This is all covered in his book, and he covers the restatement of the central dogma. Like, I don't know what you're talking about. You're pretending like you have information that he doesn't know. This is in the same book. Dance to the Tune of Life, Biological Relativity, it's all there.
The important phrases here are residue by residue and sequential information. By sequential information, he's referring to the precise sequence of DNA letters, A, T, C, and G, as it relates to the precise sequence of amino acid residues in the protein that a gene codes for. For example, the DNA triplet CCT, which is one possible codon, is converted during transcription into RNA as CCU, since RNA uses uracil instead of thymine, and then is read by a ribosome during translation as coding for the amino acid proline.
He has the exact same images in his book, Living Systems, Understanding Living Systems, published last year. Dance to the Tune of Life. It's all there. I don't know what you're talking about.
The DNA sequential information was CCT. The RNA was CC.
So this is what you're going to do. You're going to pretend he doesn't know, and just to have some filler, you're going to explain the same thing that he knows already. And I know that you don't. I know that you haven't done this research and you've put together a very bad script, but please at least make a coherent argument. You're explaining the central dogma and you're saying he doesn't know it. It's in his books. And they're actually textbooks that people learn from.
And that has resulted in the amino acid proline. The central dogma simply states that you can't go from proline back to CCT. Why not? It's very simple. The genetic code is redundant. There are 4 ways to get proline: CCT, CCC, CCA, and CCG. You can't tell by looking at a proline residue which of these 4 codons coded for it. Hence, the precise DNA sequential information has been lost and cannot be recovered from the amino acid alone. Look at this chart of RNA codons. You can see very clearly how multiple sequences result in the same amino acid. This is because there are 20 amino acids found in extant life and 4 DNA bases to code for them. One-to-one correspondence doesn't work. 4 bases can't code for 20 amino acids, so we need codons with more than 1 base in them. If codons were 2 bases, that would be 4 squared, which is 16 possibilities. So that's not quite enough either. That means nature had to use
all irrelevant, because this is stuff he covers. You're pretending like he doesn't know it.
Codons with 3 bases, and that gives us 4 cubed, which is 64 possibilities. And that's quite a bit more than 20, which is why there is so much redundancy, with almost all of the amino acids resulting from more than 1 codon, with some corresponding to as many as 6 codons. To be totally clear, this is 9th grade biology knowledge. Transcription.
Yep. And he goes over in a lot more detail than what you did here.
In translation, the process by which information flows from DNA to RNA to protein and never from protein back to nucleic acids is learned by children. And this is all that is meant by the central dogma. It refers to the nature of gene expression. Anyone who brings up things like reverse transcriptase, an enzyme which can convert RNA into DNA, as some kind of violation of the central dogma, are only demonstrating that they don't know what it means. Why Crick even referred to it as a dogma in the first place is a bit mystifying, since he was simply trying to emphasize its central and powerful nature, rather than make any kind of religious or philosophical implication. It probably wasn't the best choice of words, but people like Noble capitalize on it in order.
No, that's not true. It's not true. I know what you're doing. You've made a bunch of incoherent statements and you've basically slandered him, and now you're just going over like, why did you spend so long explaining the central dogma? We all know what it is, and you're pretending like he doesn't know it. Like, this is really it's a really poor attempt.
To paint evolutionary biology as stubbornly clinging to outdated information, which is actually what religious zealots do, not scientists, as is evidenced by the incredible progress that has been made in evolutionary biology and every other scientific field over the past century or two. Back to the point at hand, notice how this explanation of the central dogma has nothing to do with the basic fact that the environment influences gene expression, or that epigenetic markers can be inherited. Once again, Noble attacks the central dogma.
Yeah, he covers, but he explains the studies going back to Waddington and then all the way to the recent times. He goes over all these papers, and you can see that in the debate with Dawkins. You can see that in my discussion with you. Like, what are you talking about? This is separate. He explains the central dogma, and then he explains how epigenetics can lead to genetic assimilation. Like, I don't understand. What exactly are you doing? What is the point of this? You're trying to say he doesn't know what the central dogma is. That's not true. You're trying to say that he hasn't provided the evidence that epigenetics can lead to genetic assimilation. We've known that through since the 50s. What are you talking about?
Because it's called a dogma, and that is in line with his goal to paint neo-Darwinism as a religion. How do you defeat a religion? You show that their dogmas are wrong. But at the very basic level, we should expect the world-renowned physiologist to at least understand the central dogma.
Yeah, he does understand the central dogma. I literally don't understand what the whole point of this was, except if your intention was to bamboozle the audience with a lot of scientific detail and just confuse them and make your video sound scientific, because you haven't said anything substantial so far. What's significant about what you just said in the last 10 minutes? What is it?
Central dogma. Finished. There is no central dogma.
No, there is, and it's doing just fine, unless you can show everyone how to go from a sequence of amino acid residues back to a specific DNA sequence, which we all know you can't. To get such a basic concept in molecular biology this wrong is embarrassing. And again, this is just one of the many ways that Noble mischaracterizes neo-Darwinism. All neo-Darwinists have known the Weissman barrier wasn't absolute from the beginning. Again, it doesn't even apply to plants or unicellular organisms, and while they didn't know the biochemical basis for it...
Well, if everybody agreed about it, he wouldn't be publishing papers about why the Weissman barrier no longer exists. Why would any scientific journal accept a paper? Do you see how incoherent your narrative is? If there isn't a problem to be dealt with, how can you publish a peer-reviewed solution?
Neo-Darwinists have been incorporating aspects of epigenetics, like maternal effects, into their mathematical models since the 1940s. Speaking of epigenetics...
And he refers to Barbara McClintock, who won the Nobel Prize. He refers to genomic reorganization. That's fine. Like, I don't understand. Like, you're basically concurring with him and pretending like you're the one correcting him when he's pointing out those very things to say that neo-Darwinism is out of date. Do you see how wrong you are in this? I don't even think you're going to get... I think you're going to watch this video and it's going to go over your head, because you've created such a confusion in your own mind just to win over the audience because you lost a debate. But anyway, let's see what else you have to say.
Let's get a closer look at this as well. Since epigenetics exists and is known to occasionally persist to future generations, Noble thinks this undermines neo-Darwinism, heralding the triumphant return of Jean-Baptiste de Lamarck, who posited that physical changes in an organism acquired during its lifetime can be...
By the way, Denis Noble disagrees with the giraffe example. I don't know why you're using the giraffe example when he actually... And also, he doesn't agree with Lamarck totally. And he believes Lamarck's ideas have been misrepresented. So they're not as simplistic as people make them out to be. And in particular, he says he doesn't agree with the giraffe example. Did you even do your research?
Passed on to its offspring. A logical conclusion of his idea would be that a man could work out a lot to become very muscular and then therefore have muscular children, something which is now understood to be totally nonsensical.
Do you see how he's trying to just make this into some sort of cartoon?
Of Jean-Baptiste de Lamarck.
But the scientific papers that he's referring to, they're a lot more nuanced, and they talk about genetic assimilation. And remember the fruit fly example that I went over in the debate?
Posited that physical changes in an organism therefore have muscular children, something which is now...
So he's just trying to make a joke of it. Why don't you just go over the papers that speak about transgenerational inheritance and genetic assimilation? Just go over the papers, read the bloody papers and discuss them, rather than just having pictures and making your audience laugh.
Understood to be totally nonsensical. Noble has written extensively that we should revive this long-maligned French naturalist that modern molecular biology has...
By the way, who thought Lamarck was right? Darwin. Darwin thought Lamarck was right. In fact, in the debate, there's an interesting part where Richard Dawkins and Denis Noble are speaking about Lamarck and his links to Darwin, for anyone that's interested.
It's vindicated him, and we need to rewrite the textbooks to reflect this.
The Weissman barrier does...
Yeah, rewriting the textbooks, that's something which Denis Noble and James Shapiro actually published a paper on, yeah. So they actually published on this and all the mistakes in the textbooks that you actually have.
Stop everything going across it, and so on. You can go through points. So I think we need the textbooks rewriting,
I wonder if Denis has even read the college level biology.
You wonder if he's read the college level biology textbooks when he's publishing, not college level textbooks. He's publishing at the higher end with MIT, with Cambridge, with Oxford, and in journals. Like, do you not have any self-awareness? Shameless, absolutely shameless. This guy's really funny. At least he's funny. What else can we say about him? At least he's funny.
Textbooks that are used today, because if he did, he wouldn't be making such egregious errors. Let's first make it perfectly clear that Lamarckian evolution is still false for two key reasons. The first is that Lamarck's views on evolution were not synonymous
So, like I said, he doesn't agree with the giraffe example anyway.
with his views on inheritance. Noble is very confused on this point. Evolution is about
No, he's not confused. Again, you just keep saying these things. Just keep saying them again and again, again and again, again and again. Take out one of his papers and show why he's wrong.
how populations change over time, irrespective of the mechanism of inheritance. Both Lamarck and Darwin believed that the environment could shape the hereditary material. So how can Lamarckian evolution be synonymous?
Darwin actually agreed with Lamarck and would have disagreed with the Weismann barrier. Do you even know the history here?
With the inheritance of acquired characters, if Darwin also believed in it. And of course, we now understand that exogenous or endogenous mutagens can alter the genetic material in germline cells, which will then be passed on to any offspring. That is an enormous part of evolution. The environment alters the genome. Everyone knows this.
The environment alters the genome. Everyone knows this. And that's the point Denis Noble's making. That point challenges totally the Weismann barrier. You just shot yourself in the foot. The environment alters the genome. You're acting schizophrenic in this video. You're pretending like you're challenging Noble. Then you're taking Noble's conclusions and saying, we've always known this. This is a very bizarre. The environment alters the genome. That was the beginning of the debate between Dawkins and Noble, where Dawkins was saying genes are causal and Noble was saying genes are not the primary cause. And the central point was about how the environment can change the genome, and Dawkins was disagreeing, and they went back and forth.
But Lamarck believed that evolution was progressive and that it was caused by individuals struggling with their environment, exerting their own internal force of will to grow or shrink certain organs in a process he called use and disuse. The famous example is the giraffe stretching its neck to eat more leaves at higher branches. By using its neck...
Again, he actually disagrees with the giraffe example. And you don't have to agree with everything that Darwin said or Lamarck said, because some of the ideas could be wrong. Some of the examples could be wrong.
Muscles, they grew larger, and its offspring would also have larger neck muscles, according to Lamarck. Importantly, Lamarck didn't believe that the individuals would have more offspring and increase their new traits frequency in the population. He believed that each and every individual giraffe was stretching their necks. Having more offspring is a Darwinian idea resulting from the concept of natural selection, not a Lamarckian one. Lamarckian evolution is not about fitness or even adaptation, but about how organisms get more complex and progress to higher stages of life. All of this is complete bullshit in light of modern biology.
Yeah, so the giraffe example, Denis Noble disagrees with. He actually completely rejects it. So you're bringing up something that he agrees with you on? Like, I don't understand. Can we just stick to the modern science and the things Denis Noble has said rather than things he hasn't said but which are easy to knock down?
No one believes this anymore.
The best thing for you to do is to steelman him, and to make it easy for you, I'll put it this way. Go and watch just one segment of the debate between Dawkins and Noble in which they are focusing on transgenerational inheritance. That's it. Just take that clip and I want you to watch it, and I want you to explain what's going on, because you've totally not understood what this debate is about. I actually thought this video is going to be more substantial, and it's completely incoherent. It's completely incoherent. I don't even know what you're trying to achieve right now. It just sounds like you just wanted to just make a response. It doesn't matter whether it's coherent or not.
And Lamarck's evolutionary ideas should remain in the dustbin of history, no matter how much Noble likes them. But we can see little hints in Lamarck's ideas that make them appealing to people like Noble. Notice how Lamarckian evolution...
Okay, so I want you to understand something, yeah? Purpose in Evolution, which is a book you previously published, which was published by MIT and all these biologists, bringing back purpose in biology, which is the view of Michael Roos as well. is a view that's very well known. You're just trying to turn it into some sort of Drake meme. Like, just think about it, right? I mean, this is what this guy is doing. He's just trying to turn it into a meme. Okay, if Denis Noble never existed, purpose in biology would still be a big thing. And purpose in biology is a direct challenge to the gene-centric view. That's why people like Dawkins are against it. Do you even understand the landscape of where the flags are and where people agree and disagree with each other? I don't think you do.
Is purposeful. It's progressive, with organisms consciously, through their own efforts, directing the evolutionary process, almost like a divine spark that can't be explained by blind naturalistic processes.
Nope.
Doesn't that sound exactly like the kinds of things Noble says, exactly the kind of nonsense the Templeton Foundation tries to promote? The fact that we still haven't...
Dawkins is a naturalist, and so is Noble. They're both naturalists. They only stick to naturalism. So you've completely misrepresented him here again.
buried Lamarck is not because there's any evidence for his style of evolution, but because some people are philosophically attracted to his ideas. Darwin's view of evolution is cold and indifferent, heritable variation that causes the fitter organisms to have more offspring, and over time, the population becomes more adapted. Not because it is trying to be more adapted, but by blind statistics. People don't like that. Some prefer Lamarck's.
Again, what are you talking about here? You have to make your point clear, and it's not clear what you're trying to do. It's almost like you go off into all these tangential cul-de-sacs, and then you don't get anywhere. You don't get to the point. You just mention something before you reach a particular conclusion about it, or make an argument about it, or give evidence for it. You just change to something else.
View with its focus on individual agency and meaning. But evolutionary biology is not here to make you feel good or give you meaning and purpose. It's science that explains the emergence and maintenance of biodiversity. And whether you like it or not, the natural processes of evolution don't care about you, just as can be said about the formation of stars or chemical.
What are you talking about here? Evolution doesn't care about you and feelings, and what's that got to do with? Again, you're just confusing so many different things together just to sound coherent.
Reactions or any other subject of scientific inquiry. The second reason Lamarck is wrong is because transgenerational epigenetic inheritance, or the passing of traits from one generation to the next without direct alteration of the primary DNA sequence, has very little evidence for being a major driver of evolution.
Aha. Transgenerational epigenetic inheritance is not a major driver of evolution. That's very different to what you said during the debate. I was giving evidence for transgenerational epigenetic inheritance through genetic assimilation. You didn't even know what that is. Now you've changed your tone. Now you said it's not a major driver of evolution. So we've made some progress. Now you're simply saying that mechanism is not a significant force, but the mechanism's there. And that was my point. And that completely contradicts the Weismann barrier. And it completely contradicts the selfish gene perspective. Okay, let's see where you go with this.
Certainly nowhere near on par with genetic inheritance. The reasons for this have been known for over 100 years, so let's walk through a few examples. For natural selection to be effective on organisms, there must be variation between them, and that variation needs to be heritable. Heritable variation could emerge at the DNA level by mutation, in which case it is classic genetic variation, or it could emerge at the epigenetic level induced by the environment itself.
That was my point. Thank you for conceding my point.
Once again, an example of this would be histone modification, or an alteration of how the genome interacts with the proteins it coils around, thus having an impact on which genes are available for transcription. In agricultural and laboratory settings, humans apply what amounts to environmental pressure on populations to evolve. We select for certain traits by permitting only certain individuals to breed, just like the presence of antibiotics selects for antibiotic resistance in bacteria. Only those which acquire this trait will be able to reproduce. Noble contends that epigenetic inheritance emerges from this environmental pressure, and that's how the environment gets information into the germline. So if that's really how evolution works, then we should be able to remove all the DNA sequence variation from a population, and it should still be able to adapt, because the environment is inducing new variation at the epigenetic level, independent of the DNA. To reiterate, we are talking about epigenetic variation still be able to adapt, because the environment is...
Wait. You just said some nonsense. Let's listen to that a bit more carefully.
Is inducing new variation at the epigenetic level, independent of the DNA.
Inducing new variation at the epigenetic level, independent of the DNA. No, that's not what the argument is. The argument is that the expression at the DNA level is impacted by the environment, and that expression is over generations assimilated into the DNA. So epigenetic inheritance over time becomes hardwired into real genetic change. What are you talking about? You don't understand this stuff. Like before, at least you agreed with transgenerational inheritance, but now you're saying things which are just not making any sense.
To reiterate,
we need to discuss this. We need to discuss this. I'm sorry, Mr. Farina. Like literally every single point separately. I want to, like, literally one segment of your video we should have a discussion on, and there's quite a few segments I want to talk to you about, but just this particular point as well. Like, you can't get away with this on the internet nowadays. You're going to get exposed.
we are talking about epigenetic variation, which does not involve any changes to the actual DNA sequence. So how well can a population adapt?
No. Epigenetic inheritance is assimilated over generations. Again, the fruit fly example, Conrad Waddington, and there's been a lot more stuff done since. Like, you literally don't know what you're talking about.
If it has no genetic variation? Any freshman biology student can tell you that without genetic variation, populations fail to adapt. This has been confirmed thousands of times by farmers and livestock breeders all around the world who consistently apply environmental pressure to their stock. But once they've exhausted the genetic variation, that stock ceases to respond to the pressure. In laboratory settings, if you inbreed a population for many generations and then apply selective pressure to it, that pressure never induces an epigenetic character that allows it to adapt further. Inbred populations are evolutionary dead ends. This is also a principle of conservation genetics. Endangered species that are highly inbred are threatened by the fact that they don't possess the genetic variation to respond to changing environmental conditions. If epigenetics were the prime driver of adaptation, then inbred populations shouldn't be a problem. The environment.
You simply are completely unaware of the things that I've been saying in the book, in the video. Denis Noble's argument goes back to looking at the genome, and the majority of the changes in the history of the genome is due to genome reorganization, not due to small incremental random changes. He references scientific literature for that point. In fact, it's the main point, the main argument he makes in his debate with Dawkins, and you completely missed out. Unless you're going to mention it now, and then let's see if you can deal with it. But this was the point you were supposed to tackle that paper and tackle that argument, and you didn't even talk about it. I'm not even sure if you're aware of it. I want to ask you an honest question. If you did this, or if you just like paid some child to do this, and you don't know what you're doing, because if you paid someone to do it, that would be dishonest, but I would still not think of you as being someone that incoherent. But right now you're just being incoherent. If you're going to tackle someone, steel man their position, the Human Genome Project and the argument from genomic reorganization, which was James Shapiro's argument, which Denis Noble refers to, and that's the prime driving argument that he uses in his debate and in his books, and it's something that Dawkins had no response to. You haven't even covered it in your video. Just think about that. The main argument that he uses, you didn't even cover.
Will just induce new variation, right? The DNA sequence shouldn't need to be different. Epigenetic markers will arise, and this variance can be acted upon by natural selection, thus allowing for evolution in response to stresses. And yet, this does not happen, ever. There is no room for speculation here. It is utterly conclusive. Furthermore, these facts also imply that epigenetic variation is not wholly independent of underlying DNA sequence variation.
Of course it's not. Like I already explained.
Ever. There is no room for speculation here. It is utterly conclusive. Furthermore, these facts also imply that epigenetic variation is not wholly independent of underlying DNA sequence variation. Many studies have demonstrated a widespread reliance of epigenetics on DNA sequence variation. Indeed, knockout studies have shown that if you delete the DNA methyltransferase gene, which is involved in methylation, a form of epigenetic silencing, then epigenetic markers disappear entirely from the genome.
Yep, and Denis Noble mentions that in his debate with Dawkins, and he actually gives an argument, and the argument he actually gives is that before something becomes hard, as in assimilated into the genome, it's soft, and the reason it's soft is because environmental conditions can actually change, and since they can change, if something becomes hard, then it becomes a detrimental trait rather than something that's actually adaptive and good for you and beneficial for you. So he says things are soft until they become hard over generations. He actually explains that process. This is really poor, Farina. I am disappointed. This is really bad.
Demonstrates that epigenetics is not purely an extra DNA phenomenon, but rather is actually controlled by the genome itself, indicating that epigenetic systems evolved by classic neo-Darwinian means. The emergence of a gene that could influence epigenetic states in response to the environment.
It didn't evolve by classical neo-Darwinian means because of the genomic paper, which you didn't reference. Genomic reorganization, James Shapiro. This was the main thing that they were debating about.
Would be highly favored, and in time the entire system could be elaborated into the complex regulatory networks we see in living organisms today. Lastly, and perhaps most importantly, epigenetic inheritance is highly unstable and typically ephemeral. In animals, there's very little evidence that epigenetic markers persist more than 2 to 3 generations after the environmental pressure has been removed.
Yeah, and Denis Noble basically says that happens if the conditions are not conducive. If the conditions are conducive, then it stays. You've only mentioned half of it.
Plants can maintain these markers longer, as would be expected given their general lack of a Weissman barrier, but long-term.
Okay, well, I agree with you there, but Noble agrees with you. Like, that point doesn't support you in any way. That's true. What you said, that the Wiseman barrier isn't there in the plants in the same level, in the same way that in the living world, sometimes epigenetic changes can last, sometimes they cannot last. With plants, is different. Okay, these things were all known, but the barrier itself, the idea that the gene, as Richard Dawkins says in The Selfish Gene, that is sealed from the outside world. The genome is sealed from the outside world. That's total nonsense. That understanding of the Wiseman barrier is totally wrong.
Evolutionary change requires that variation lasts long enough to spread through the entire population. Otherwise,
like I said, just get Dawkins to endorse your video. I think he'll be highly embarrassed. In fact, get him to watch just 5 minutes, take out a snippet and say, can you endorse just this part? I want to see if he's going to endorse any of it.
all that epigenetics is causing is temporary acclimation, not evolutionary adaptation. A related concept, genetic assimilation, is often referenced in order to support the idea.
Well done. Well done. So yeah, you didn't know what this was before the debate. Now you learned it, and you're probably going to butcher it. You're probably not even going to explain it properly and probably misrepresent what's going on.
Yeah, that environmentally induced traits can become genetically fixed in a population. Developed in the 1940s, it was proposed that environmental pressures can trigger phenotypic changes, which are then later encoded in the genetic material, making them permanent even if the environmental stimulus later becomes absent. But the reality is that this process is strictly Darwinian. The environment.
Okay, so you agree it actually happens. The environment can change the genome. That goes totally against the central dogma. That goes totally against the gene-centric view. That goes totally against the genome, as Dawkins says it, sealed from the outside world. What are you doing? What are you doing? You're making points which go against your position, and you're pretending like that's always been your position.
Exposes existing genetic variation, and natural selection acts on this variation. The genetic material is not directly modified in response to environmental stimuli. It is simply that chance mutations which enhance or stabilize the unusual phenotype get selected for. So any attempt to conflate this phenomenon with Lamarckian inheritance,
which is physiology guiding evolution. Well done. Physiology guiding evolution
is just plain wrong. To summarize, Lamarckian evolution is wrong because it relies on the false idea of use and disuse, and because epigenetic inheritance has consistent.
That's not. Nope. Lamarckism is completely misrepresented here, and you can see why when you look at the previous book that you actually referred to, which is MIT on Purpose. Epigenetic inheritance is inferior to genetic inheritance. You don't understand what's going on here. Epigenetic inheritance is inferior to genetic inheritance. Okay, let me explain to you what's going on, because that statement is very confusing and incoherent. Genetic inheritance is not static and immortal. Genetic inheritance is impacted by environmentally induced epigenetic changes, which then can be assimilated into the genome. And so epigenetic changes can turn into real genetic changes. The majority of the human genome is moving, or its changes are due to genome reorganization, not random mutations, which is supposed to be the classical neo-Darwinian idea. You have no idea what you're talking about. Where you got a free class today.
Been shown to be profoundly inferior in terms of promoting adaptation when compared with genetic inheritance. While epigenetics is an important source of phenotypic plasticity and perhaps contributes to acclimation over short timescales.
Okay, at least you agree with that important source, but you got the rest of it wrong. But you agree transgenerational epigenetic inheritance happens. That's good. It's not simply a major driver of evolution. Okay, then deal with Noble's paper, which you still haven't referred to yet.
There's no evidence that it can drive large-scale evolutionary change. All of this brings us back to the question of why Noble and his acolytes so desperately wish to revive Lamarckian evolution if the evidence for it is so flimsy. The only real conclusion we can draw is that they enjoy the obsolete ideas that Lamarck espoused for political.
No, Denis Noble is not someone who believes in intelligent design. He's a naturalist.
Philosophical and theological reasons. They want evolution to have a purpose, and they want individuals to have agency in directing their.
Okay, deal with the MIT book. Okay, you know what? To make it easier, like we're coming back full circle. You started off with the MIT book. Let's me and you just have a discussion on the MIT book. Let's just go over that book. Me and you just have a discussion about that book. I can get James Folder. We'll literally just go over that book and just see if you. In fact, I'm gonna let you speak. I'm gonna let you articulate what they're saying, and I'm going to see if you actually can even comprehend, if you're even literate, scientifically literate, because that's a heavy book, and I'm going to see if you even understand their concepts.
Futures. But these desires don't justify lying about an entire scientific paradigm or skewing the results of genetic studies. Science is not about accepting what we want to be true, but discovering what actually is true. Real scientists know this, which means that Noble's rhetoric in this area is guided by a deliberate intent to misrepresent scientific principles to push a theological agenda, even if it's the agenda of his handlers.
Not true.
Not his own. Moving right along, nothing gets under the skin of creationists and Templeton-funded buffoons like the concept of random mutations. Noble insists that the idea that mutations happen randomly is another one of those dogmatic assumptions.
No, he does actually believe random mutations take place. He just doesn't believe they are a major source of evolution.
Early neo-Darwinists made has been undermined by modern molecular biology. Noble thinks that mutations happen on purpose. They are directed by the organism that is modifying its own genome in order to overcome challenges.
He believes randomness is harnessed. That stochastic process is harnessed. Remember the example I gave of somatic hypermutation? Like, you haven't learned anything even from the debate. If you go back to the B cell example I gave about somatic hypermutation and randomness being used, he doesn't deny randomness, but he says there's a physiological system to use randomness for a particular end. You don't understand him. You're too simplistic. Nothing wrong with being simple, but you're just wrong. This is way beyond you. This stuff is way beyond you.
The environment is throwing at it. His crony, the University of Chicago biochemist James Shapiro, has come up with
his crony, right? James Shapiro is the inheritor of Barbara McClintock, the winner of the Nobel Prize. And look at the way he's speaking about him. And this guy is who Carl Woese said his book is a game changer.
whole theory around this that he calls natural genetic engineering, something which sounds like it could have come directly from Meyer or Behe at Discovery Institute.
Nope, because he's a naturalist. You can see my interviews with him.
Noble believes that random changes to the DNA sequence can't possibly create new things. New forms must have emerged on purpose by the delicate designing power of the organisms themselves. This is, of course, legitimately insane. First,
it's not legitimately insane. He's published. And it's not the way that you put it. You made a straw man of him. Anyway.
By random mutations, we should understand it to mean random with respect to an organism's need. That is, you don't get a beneficial mutation just because you need one. The early neo-Darwinists didn't know whether or not this was true, but several laboratory experiments in the 1940s and 50s demonstrated conclusively that mutations don't occur because you need them to. They are simply always occurring due to replicative error as well as
the maze examples from the 1920s, 30s, 40s, like this guy's completely unaware of any of this stuff. And what he's doing continuously is making straw mans and then tackling them. And he's unable to steel man even one of the sub-positions of these guys.
And exogenous mutants. It is simply a fundamental characteristic of living organisms that the genetic code does not maintain flawless fidelity, and these changes are random. The first of these experiments demonstrating the random nature of mutation was the Luria-Delbruck fluctuation test of 1943. They subjected several colonies of bacteria to a bacteriophage and then recorded which cell lines obtained resistance. If the environment could induce mutations, then they expected a relatively even number of lines to acquire the mutation across all colonies, since the selected pressure was the same in each. If mutations were random, however, then there should be a lot of variation between each colony as to whether or not they managed to get the right mutation. Indeed, what they found was very high variation between colonies. How could this possibly be in line with directed mutation? If the environment was inducing the mutations, it was doing a really bad job at it, since the results looked no different from random chance. A similar experiment was conducted.
Horizontal gene transfer? Like, come on, man.
By the Letterbirds in 1952, where they showed bacterial resistance to penicillin was not the...
All of this stuff actually supports Denis Noble. It doesn't support you and what you were saying earlier. Like, I don't understand. You just keep switching between, criticizing him and then affirming the things that he already believes in.
Result of the exposure, but to standing genetic variation. Some of the colonies simply already possessed the variation for resistance to penicillin, and those were the ones that were able to survive. Again, it appeared that the mutation was random with respect to the need of the organism. In modern times, thanks to whole genome sequencing and highly sophisticated statistical techniques, we can reconstruct the full distribution of effects of mutations in organisms. If mutations were directed by the environment or by the organism itself to help it survive a novel pressure, then most mutations that we observe should be helpful. If, however, mutations are random with respect to their impact, then most should be either harmful or neutral, with only
Denis Noble, James Shapiro, they all agree with this. You're setting up a false test to test them and to show they're wrong, but they already agree with what you're saying.
Few by chance being helpful. The latter case is precisely what we see and have always seen. Virtually every mutational effect distribution ever measured definitively
Yep, no one disagrees with that.
shows that most mutations are either neutral or harmful. If Noble
Agree with that.
is correct, the organisms are altering their own genomes in a directed way, then they're doing a dog shit job of it. The fact is,
Nope, that's not his position. Strawman and complete misrepresentation again. Noble actually says that most changes, random changes, are not beneficial. He says that all the time.
that natural selection doesn't need organisms to direct their own mutations or for mutations to be biased towards being helpful. Even if only a tiny percentage of all mutations are helpful, population genetic theory developed by early neo-Darwinists demonstrates that selection is still extremely efficient at promoting adaptation. One mutation happens to be beneficial, the fitness of the organism is enhanced, so that mutation will proliferate in a statistically significant way. The simple
Again, the main paper, you never referred to it, about genome reorganization, and Denis Noble doesn't disagree. Random mutations do take place, and they can be selected and selected out. No one disagrees with that.
Elegance of this principle is obvious in hindsight, given what we now understand about genetics, which makes it all the more ridiculous when people try to deny its power. Getting back to the topic, all of these points are ancillary to the real purpose of the third way. What they really want is for nature to give them a sense of purpose and meaning, because this would act as a rejection of the cold, impartial materialism that creationists desperately rage against.
No, he's not a creationist, nor is James Shapiro.
We emerged from blind, pitiless natural selection, acting upon strictly random mutations, and we are nothing but our genes. How can there be any inherent meaning in the world? How can we have free will if we're just vehicles for selfish genes? Neo-Darwinism must be false, because they can't fathom a world in which meaning isn't handed down to them from somewhere, preferably the Abrahamic God. This disingenuous framing of biology has unfortunately leaked out into popular media. In July 2024, Forbes ran an article titled "Evolution May Be Purposeful and It's Freaking Scientists Out," which was just an interview with Denis Noble. In it, Noble tells the interviewer that the vertebrate immune system is an example of purposeful evolution. Mutations in B cells generate variants until one is.
And there's many biologists who agree with him, hence the MIT book that you referred to in the beginning.
Capable of destroying the invading virus. He says the organism modifies the genome of its own cells with the explicit purpose to fight infections. In reality, this phenomenon, called somatic hypermutation, is a purely neo-Darwinian.
Aha! Somatic hypermutation. Somatic hypermutation, which you didn't know about in the debate that I used to challenge neo-Darwinism, and now you're pretending it's part of neo-Darwinism, when Richard Dawkins and Denis Noble had the debate, and Denis Noble used somatic hypermutation as an argument against neo-Darwinism, and it's the same thing I did. You never knew what it was. You couldn't explain it. You couldn't articulate it. You couldn't justify a response against it, and now you're pretending it's part of neo-Darwinism. Classic.
In process, it's mutation and natural selection for the purpose of increasing the diversity of antibodies. These cells with mutated antibodies undergo selection, and those that
And he's using the same example that I gave him in the debate. Well done.
produce higher affinity antibodies are preferentially expanded. It's not distinct from any other example of neo-Darwinian evolution except for the rate at which it occurs. It's a rapid trial and error process on antibody designs, and it is in no way guided. It's completely blind. To Noble, that any cell might be.
What did you say? It's due to the environment, and that's all he's saying. He's not saying it's guided by a creator. He's not saying anything like that. He's saying it's due to the environment. The environment induces the change, and you just said it. That is his exact point.
Prescribed a purpose, like a blood cell or a skin cell, is somehow a challenge to neo-Darwinism, because apparently evolutionary biology thinks that nothing in your body has any purpose. Noble is pretending that neo-Darwinists are freaking out at the idea of anything having a purpose. We're wading into the swamp of philosophy and semantics now, which was inevitable given that over half of the third-way clergy are philosophers instead of biologists. But there's a long tradition in science of moving away from prescribing purpose to objects the more we come to understand them. Evolutionary biologists don't use purposive language for the simple reason that we can explain the emergence of the immune system or any.
By the way, I might as well plug some books here. So Michael Roos's book on purpose, philosophy of biology, Oxford anthology, which also has academics speaking about purpose in biology. Even if Denis Noble never existed and James Shapiro never existed and Michael Roos never existed, the argument for purpose in biology is there. So this guy can cry all he wants.
For seemingly purposeful behavior in non-human organisms without appealing to words like purpose and agency. Furthermore, using these kinds of words, even colloquially, can mislead the general public because people tend to think about these terms in anthropomorphic ways. For example, I know Sally down the street has agency, but biologists are telling me now that bacteria have agency too. So Sally and bacteria have the same kind of agency.
Nope, that's a fallacy of equivocation. And we're not talking about a Platonic type of form or purpose given. We're talking about Aristotelian internal one. Remember his four causes. All right. So material, formal, final, efficient. Here we are referring to final. Teleology.
This is obviously false, so let's try to be more exact. Biological agency, to Noble and friends, refers to an organism's capacity for goal-directed, self-determining activity, and that this agency emerges independently of development, physiology, or adaptation by natural selection. In the 2023 book, Evolution on Purpose.
Fantastic. Can we please read this book? Look, Frina, I've spent nearly 3 hours on you now. Can we just have a discussion about this book? Nothing else. I'll get Fodor on it, and we'll just discuss this book. I'll be nice this time.
Edited by Noble and pals, some examples are given of agential behavior. They include things like responding to external stimuli. So to be clear, literally everything an organism does to them would be an example of purposeful behavior.
Okay, so let's go over that book. Why don't you refer to the book and challenge it? You just mocked it.
Unicellular organisms responding to stimuli via phototaxis or chemotaxis would be an example of agency. So beyond the concept now becoming meaningless, since it is simply a different way of wording a fundamental.
No, it's not meaningless. Why would it be published by MIT? Again, you're nobody here. You're literally a nobody.
Property of any living organism. If all organisms possess agency, where does this agency come from? There are two possibilities. First, that it emerges in the same way agency comes about in humans. There's a cognitive psychological phenomenon that includes things like intentionality and symbolic reasoning. But this can't be the explanation for universal agency because it requires complex brains. And organisms like bacteria clearly don't have these. Why do simpler organisms display agential behavior then? A rather obvious reason is that it promotes their survival and reproduction. If a paramecium comes across chemicals in its surroundings that are released by one of its predators, it would improve its probability of survival to be able to move away from that area. If variation existed in this population of paramecia such that the capacity.
Okay. I wanted him to go into that book, but he's clearly not.
For chemical recognition and subsequent response arose, then those capable of detecting predators would survive more often and
He just dips in and out. He just shows stuff and moves on because he knows he has surface level knowledge.
leave more offspring until eventually the entire population is capable of this agential behavior. This makes it very clear that what is being described as agency is a product of adaptation by natural selection. Neo-Darwinists thus avoid using words like agency and instead rely on concepts such as fitness, strength.
Yeah. So I think you're misunderstanding here. adaptation is something that the neo-Darwinists and the third way evolutionists both agree. Neo-Darwinists are saying adaptation is due to random mutations. Third way evolutionists are saying adaptations are not due to random mutations. Adaptations are due to genome reorganization, due to the environmental selection, the pressure. So there is an agency, there is not an agency, there is a purpose-driven evolution. There is a purpose-driven process which is directing changes, somatic hypermutation, which you just went over. Why are you pretending like automatically believing in adaptation means supporting neo-Darwinism? I don't understand how you've made the link. Okay, let me put it to you in very simple terms. What is it about an adaptation that is a necessary and sufficient condition to conclude neo-Darwinism? Very simple question. What is it that is necessary and sufficient about an adaptation to conclude neo-Darwinism is the cause of it? That's just answer me that before we get into anything else.
Selection, adaptation, and so forth, because these words made it perfectly clear that evolution is the statistical association between survival and reproduction with heritable variation. This kind of language can apply without confusion to all organisms. Sally and the bacteria each have adaptations due to the past action of natural selection, but this does not imply that Sally and the bacterium are the same. To speak of different agencies is useless and confusing. This
Yeah, that's the fallacy of equivocation.
Darwinian paradigm is not only conceptually useful, but it has resulted in mountains of empirical insights, including explaining how things like cooperation and altruism evolve in organisms that don't even have complex brains. No such advance has ever been made by taking the perspective that organisms have agency. For organismal agency to be a unique research avenue, it needs to make different predictions than those made by neo-Darwinism or adaptation by
it needs to make predictions which are different to neo-Darwinism, and the prediction it makes is that the environment drives evolution, physiology guides evolution. And you've just agreed with that when it comes to somatic hypermutation. And that somatic hypermutation is a process which is not neo-Darwinian. So not only did they find something which contradicts neo-Darwinism, you agreed it's there.
natural selection, but all the examples proposed of purpose-driven actions in nature are exactly those explainable by natural selection. These are things like choosing a mate, foraging for food, responding to stimuli, and so forth. If these behaviors are hallmarks of agency, then agency can't be some understudied phenomenon in science, because all of these behaviors have been investigated extensively, making it impossible to claim that there's some brand new paradigm that needs to be investigated. The issue is that the agency hypothesis makes the exact same predictions as the neo-Darwinian one. They are what is called coextensive, but unlike the neo-Darwinian paradigm, which provides a process-based investigative. The issue is that the agency hypothesis
Right, this I agree with. There are some predictions which they both make, but there's predictions that neo-Darwinism doesn't make. Somatic hypermutation is not something neo-Darwinists predicted. For example, junk DNA being junk, that's what neo-Darwinism said, but it turned out to be the opposite, and that fitted in line with the third way evolutionists, right? And the idea that we have continuously from the neo-Darwinian perspective that the fossil record is gradualistic, that is something which is a prediction that they make. Yes, a prediction that's turned out to be wrong. So what if there's predictions that they both agree about? There's lots of predictions that they don't agree about, and you don't cover them. And you don't cover the main paper that he used in his debate against Dawkins.
makes the exact same predictions as the neo-Darwinian one. They are what is called coextensive, but unlike the neo-Darwinian paradigm, which provides a process-based natural mechanism for explaining the emergence of what can be referred to as agency, the purposive perspective does not. All it asks of us is to not see organisms like machines, but active agents. This is a philosophical plea, not the ground plan for a new research program. A key reason that agency-based theories of organisms are vacuous is because they are ultimately empirically unfounded.
That's not true. That's not true. And you haven't read the book. You keep referring to it, and you haven't read the book. Be honest, you haven't read it.
An organism displays a kind of purposeful behavior, then we can ask two questions. Is it human cognition, in which case we can ask a person why they did something, or is that behavior connected to fitness, in which case we can explain the behavior as a result of adaptation by natural selection. But if an organism does something that isn't clearly related to fitness,
Yeah, try and publish this as a paper as a response to the MIT book. Complete hogwash.
or human psychology, it's impossible to know if that behavior was undertaken on purpose. You can't ask a paramecium if it really wanted to swim to the open arms of that amoeba. It's critical in science for research programs to have an empirical foundation, and this is totally lacking in the purpose-driven perspective. We can demonstrate.
Nope, it's not lacking in the purpose-driven perspective. They all use scientific data in the same way the Darwinists do, but they come to a different inference.
This with a great flowchart from a recent paper titled Biological Agency, a concept without a research program. Without an empirical grounding, noble veers outside the realm of science.
Yeah, so these are biologists who are responding to them, who don't agree with them, who they go back and forth with. What exactly is this saying? Biologists disagree with them. Okay, that's fine. They disagree with those that disagree with them.
When he talks of agency in organisms, that is not explainable by natural selection or basic biochemistry. If neither of these things explain goal-directed behavior, then the behavior is either not shared by all organisms or cannot be determined empirically and is thus outside of the purview of science. So if there's no scientific...
Wait. What did you say there?
Biological agency, a concept without a research program. Without an empirical grounding, noble veers outside of the realm of science when he talks of agency in organisms.
Noble veers outside the realm of science when he talks of agency in organisms. Not true. Why is that the case? Why is it to talk about purpose or agency? Why does that become outside of science? William Harvey, when he discovered the circulation of blood, he used the distinctions that Aristotle makes in terms of causation and also purpose to actually come up with his answer. Purpose is being used all the time in biology. Functionality is being used. Like, what are you talking about? Why is that outside the agency of science? You've just stated it.
It's not explainable by
And you said it's not science. Why? Why is it not science?
natural selection or basic biochemistry. If neither of these things explain goal-directed behavior, then the behavior is either not shared by all organisms or cannot be determined empirically and is thus outside of the purview of science. So if there's no scientific backing for this idea, why are there so many scientists on the Third Way website? Why is it that so many big brains like Noble can't resist using this kind of purposive language? For those not religiously motivated, the answer is probably
Third way of evolution are not theists. And that's why he's trying to build that image.
psychological. Humans are drawn to explaining all kinds of things with purposive language that clearly don't have purposes. In 1944, psychologists put together a series of still animations showing an open box and what looked like triangles and circles moving around that box. When
Useless. Just these are just fillers to make him sound smart. That's all it is.
shown to participants, most of them said that the triangles and circles were trying to get in the box, despite the fact that inanimate objects don't have intentions and can't try to do anything. Another study examined how people responded to the question, the Earth has an ozone layer, in order to protect.
Okay, so people can give agency to something that's not there. People can believe in idols. People can believe in all that type of stuff. What's that got to do with peer-reviewed, published papers that academics are publishing? What are you talking about? Why don't you publish a response against them? All of this is just simply tapping into the unconscious mind, using NLP, building these demons, building these strawmans, and just knocking them down.
From UV light. The question was posed on a timer, so people had to answer quickly to test implicit purposive thinking. Again, the Earth is an inanimate object which can't have a purpose, and the same goes for atmospheric particles. But the majority of participants, when put on a timer, said this statement was true. Then, given time to think about it, researchers found that participants with religious backgrounds were more likely to still assign.
Oh, right. Yeah, but what's that got to do with? Just stick to Denis Noble and stick to the papers, and you've got this time to deal with the papers. Not say, oh, they're religiously motivated, when they explicitly say they don't believe intelligent design or creationism is science, and Denis Noble is a naturalist, and so is James Shapiro, and all the rest of these guys are using naturalism. You're making a straw man.
Your purpose than those with non-religious backgrounds, who, with more time, answered the question in the negative. So humans seem to have an implicit bias towards prescribing purpose to things that don't have it. The interaction.
Yeah, we assign purpose to things that don't have it, but we do assign things to purpose that do have it. Like, what's your point?
Between our implicit biases and our tendencies towards supernatural thinking all lead us to seeing flamingos in clouds, Jesus on a piece of toast, or a man.
See, again, he's just completely making a straw man of the entire argument. Deal with the papers.
The moon. Evolutionary biologists recognize these biases and know that while it appears that organisms have purpose, the majority of the behaviors we observe are the result.
Okay, he's made a false dichotomy between purpose and adaptation. You can see it here. The behavior is the result of adaptation. The point is, did that adaptation come about by random, purposeless mutations, the reductive gene-centric perspective, or was it something that Denis Noble, James Shapiro, and all these people are saying, that you have genome reorganization and the environment driving organisms to have these complex adaptations? Why have you made a false dichotomy between purpose and adaptation? Like, literally, I'm going to ask you this question. Why did you make a false dichotomy between purpose on one hand and adaptation here? And what is it about adaptation, the existence of adaptation, that is a sufficient and necessary condition that adaptation came about by neo-Darwinism? That is what you're saying. But how? How? Explain how. You haven't explained anything. You haven't even, you just keep showing the cover of the book. It's the same thing you were doing, the silly stuff you were doing with James Tor, just reading the titles. This is really embarrassing. And when it goes up, it's going to be juicy, and your fans are going to cry.
Of adaptation, not intrinsic agency and purpose. Noble has either been duped by his own preconceived biases, or he's been paid to misrepresent science, or maybe a little bit of both. At the end of the day, anyone who thinks Noble should be regarded as a credible figure
Nonsense. Pure character assassination.
in evolutionary biology needs to ask themselves, why do so few scientists take Noble's ideas seriously, but so many creationists and conspiracy theorists salivate over them? Why?
Again, genetic fallacy. Not genetic fallacy. What's it called? The argument from authority. So the majority don't agree with him, therefore he's wrong, or he's a quack, or whatever. That's not true. It's not true at all.
For 10 years since Noble claimed neo-Darwinism has died, have evolutionary biologists not taken notice, causing him to go on?
No. Okay. Have evolutionary biologists basically ignored him? Michael Levin is there, and I've forgotten her name. There's an Indian biologist that you have there on the screen. They're actually hosting him, and they are a younger generation of biologists. And Michael Levin is a really well-known evolutionary biologist. They actually agree with him. So you're saying he's being ignored when showing a podcast of people hosting him. Do you understand how incoherent that is?
Podcasts to try and make his case. People who are in denial of reality will insist that the entire field is corrupt.
Okay, so when he turns up on a podcast, you're like, why is he on a podcast? When he's publishing a paper, you're ignoring the paper. What do you want him to do? Like, he's publishing papers, publishing books, coming in podcasts, and all you simply want to do in return is misrepresent his position and actually adopt his conclusions and pretend that they're already there, and then not understand that those same conclusions are what him and Dawkins are actually disagreeing about. This was too easy. I thought I had to do more work here.
And dogmatic, refusing to acknowledge this powerful paradigm shift in biology, much like other great scientific minds in history, who Noble must undoubtedly be like. But the real reason is much simpler. Noble is a crank promoting pseudoscientific ideas on the internet,
Again, character assassination.
hiding behind his credentials and achievements in physiology, and pretending that they make him qualified to overturn a discipline he has zero training in. He's bolstered by support exclusively from the general public, in particular the religious, who love to hear that evolution has given their lives
No, actually, he is against intelligent design.
meaning and purpose, which has precisely zero value in the scientific community. To spell it out even more,
No, it doesn't have zero value because it's being published everywhere. Oxford, Cambridge, MIT, Journal of Physiology, Nature, Science is being published everywhere. Zero value in the scientific community. No, it's literally published everywhere.
more clearly, to push his agenda, Noble has had to misrepresent the entire history of evolutionary biology,
Nope,
lie about the basics of molecular biology, and
nope,
outright slander neo-Darwinists by claiming
nope.
they only cling to their paradigm for the money. At the end of the day, Noble is just reading into nature what he wants to see, desperately hoping that evolution can give his life meaning. This is an embarrassing end to a renowned physiologist's career. Like those,
Nope. Literally, you've done nothing. You've done nothing. You've literally achieved nothing so far.
suffering from Nobel disease, he could have just walked away with a pristine record, but instead he let his head grow too big, and now he's gone out and stepped in shit and made an absolute fool of himself. Luckily for him, evolutionary biologists have barely even noticed. That's why you're getting this news from a science community.
You're not a science communicator. Look how after tackling him, right, and misrepresenting him and mocking him and calling him a crank, he's now promoting himself. This guy's shameless. He's actually totally shameless. Shameless individual.
Here instead. By the way, if you're interested in learning more about genetics and evolutionary biology, I have plenty of tutorials on this topic that will help ensure that you don't
Yeah, you can see in the debate, he didn't even know what the hell he was talking about. But now he wants to promote his stuff.
fall for this type of rhetoric in the future. Knowledge is power, right? So that's it for Denis Noble. If you're a full-blown creationist, you didn't want
If you look at his face here, even he doesn't believe what he's saying. He wants this to be the final chapter of Denis Noble. You didn't deal with the main argument that he made in the debate between Dawkins and himself, where he used the Human Genome Project's paper, and his paper from 2001, which is very long time ago. And he used that for the genomic reorganization idea from Barbara McClintock and James Shapiro. So you didn't even touch on that. The MIT book you kept bringing up, and you didn't actually deal with any of the arguments inside the book. You misrepresented the 2016 conference. You had literally, you used examples that Denis Noble said that he doesn't believe in, like the giraffe's neck. Darwin's gemmules, you completely got that wrong. You made false dichotomies between adaptation and purpose. You tried to say that epigenetic inheritance is lesser than genetic inheritance, when the entire argument is something different, which is that genetic inheritance over time is impacted by epigenetics through the process of genetic assimilation, which you didn't know about previously in the debate. No somatic hypermutation, but now you're pretending like that fits neo-Darwinism. What exactly did you do in all this time? Complete waste. Okay. How do we conclude? He didn't actually show why Denis Noble is a clown. He didn't show he's wrong. He's completely misaligned with Dawkins' rhetoric. Why isn't Dawkins saying the things that you're saying? Like, Dawkins is not even making the arguments that you're making. You misrepresented him on many different points. You brought in scientific jargon to make your video sound more scientific. You said he doesn't understand the central dogma when you explained the very things that he explains in his book in a much lighter way. You made lots of references to scientific arguments in terms of somatic hypermutation, genetic assimilation, transgenerational inheritance, things that I used in the debate and you didn't know what I was talking about, and now you're pretending it's part of neo-Darwinism. So look, I'll give you a very simple challenge. Get Richard Dawkins to watch your video and endorse it. Very simple. He's the one who debated Denis Noble. Read his book, The Genetic Book of the Dead, and read the chapter on Noble and see if it aligns with anything you've said in this video. On top of that, go back to the debate between Dawkins and Noble and look at the scientific papers that he's referring to, and look at the scientific papers I was referring to in my debate. You've already acknowledged some of those things. So what do you disagree with? Do you disagree with somatic hypermutation, genetic assimilation, or the inferences from it? Like, what exactly are you doing here? This was an incredibly incoherent video, and I'm actually surprised that you put it out there. It's like you didn't really understand. You're not really responding to him. You're just showing the world how ignorant you are and how misinformed you are. So here, I'll put it this way. Let's have a debate and a discussion on some simple points. Now, there's lots of ridiculous arguments you've made and false dichotomies you've made, but just the MIT book with purpose that you've been attacking, okay? I don't think you've read that book. I don't think you understand that book. So why don't I get James Fodor, we get that book, and then we go through it. That's it. That's my challenge to you. I doubt very much you're going to accept that challenge. I doubt very much you're going to accept the challenge of debating me. And I've been putting out challenges to you which you haven't responded to. And this video is 100% proof to me why you would not want to debate me live, because you'd be absolutely shredded and taken to the cleaners. And this is why you're winced. This is why you're so scared. This is why you're rattled. This is why you are domesticated and deselected in the debate, because you don't know what you're talking about. You actually don't know what you're talking about. And you haven't even bothered to understand his position even today. And how else can I end this video by other than simply inviting you to have a discussion with me? Why don't we just have a discussion? What are you scared of? Like, I'm not going to bite. I'm going to be nicer than I was last time, yeah? So look, let's have a discussion. You choose the platform. You choose whatever. If you're not happy with James Fodor, we'll go with someone else. But you've done nothing. Denis Noble is not a clown. And in this particular video, you've only shown your ignorance. You haven't actually made any solid refutation. You've only shown just the people how deeply flawed your own understanding is. And what better way to end than to recommend everybody read the book, the MIT book that he's referring to. Read Denis Noble's book, Biological Relativity. Read my book, Dawkins versus Noble, The Death of Neo-Darwinism, which I published with Sapiens Institute. So that's my last message. 3 hours. It was coming. It was long overdue, and I hope you enjoy it.